GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hundreds of thousands of operations will be cancelled amid warnings that junior doctor strikes will cause unparalleled disruption.
Good morning. It's 6 o'clock. It's Tuesday, the 11th of April. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Leading the news on this Tuesday morning, health leaders have urged the public to avoid risky behaviour as junior doctors begin walkouts. Patients could face a full month of disruption as the NHS struggles to cope with one of the worst strikes in its history.
The US President will meet with leaders from all 5 of Northern Ireland's main political parties on a visit to the UK that begins today. It's part of his push to restore power sharing in Stormont.
A trip follows violence in Londonderry yesterday with petrol bombs hurled at police during a Republican parade.
And the former head of the British Army has claimed that the Queen wanted both William and Harry to fight the Taliban in Afghanistan, but decided it was too risky to send the future heir to the throne.
Well, we say hello, good morning to you on this Tuesday morning. Hope your Easter went well. If you're back at work today or you've got time in your hands, get in touch the usual way. And they do that via
Twitter, which is at GB News, or you can email us gbnews@gbnews.uk and we'll try and read out as many as we can.
OK, the top story this morning, hundreds of thousands of operations will be cancelled from today because junior doctors across England are beginning a 4-day strike.
NHS leaders are warning it could be the most disruptive industrial action in the health services history, with services being affected well into May.
Well, the Health Secretary says the strike risks patient safety and that the BMA's demand for a 35% pay rise is unaffordable. Unaffordable it may be. Let's go to junior doctor Frankie Jackson-Spence. But how much is it needed, Frankie?
Oh, it's so crucial. I think it's a real shame that we've got to this point where junior doctors are striking for the second time. But it's honestly needs to be a wake-up call for everyone. The strikes are necessary to restore a proper functioning NHS. The junior doctors make up half of the NHS workforce, and they've seen a 26.2% pay cut in the last 15 years. And so they want to be paid appropriately for their service, for such a long period of training and so much student debt. And I worry that without action like this, the government aren't taking the workforce seriously, and that's also doom and gloom for the NHS. So it's a real shame we've got to this point, but I do think it's very necessary to get them to listen.
The trouble is, Frankie, is any progress being made in all of this? Because it feels as though both sides are just getting more entrenched in their positions. I mean, the BMA have put out a really powerful advert saying that junior doctors with 10 years' experience are being paid £28 an hour, junior doctors with 7 years' experience are being paid £24 an hour, and junior doctors with 1 year's experience just £14 an hour, which is quite shocking. But on the other hand, the government's saying it's just simply unreasonable to ask for a 35% pay increase in the context of where we are today, and it's just unaffordable.
Yeah, and can I just point out that it's not actually all about pay. Because of the poor pay, the NHS for junior doctors has become quite an undesirable place to work. You graduate after 5 or 6 years with £100,000 worth of student debt. You're then faced with thousands of pounds of mandatory exam fees, fees to exist on the medical register, insurance, indemnity, all of which are necessary to progress. And unfortunately, because of the poor pay and all of these costs, many doctors are actually leaving the NHS to move overseas where there's better standard of living and it's more desirable place to work. So that leaves lots of rota gaps and staffing issues. So these junior doctors are working these shifts for £14 an hour and actually doing the job of multiple doctors. And what it really stems down to is, it's becoming quite an unsafe place to work because of this. And we're not able to deliver the standard of care that we were able to do and how we were able to, what we trained for when we were through medical school. So, there's not been much progress made. Following the last strike back in March, the government have failed to come to a negotiation or even give the British Medical Association and junior doctors an offer. So I really hope that this time we see some progress.
Are you a junior doctor?
I am, yes.
Well, you see, I think one of the things that needs reformed is that you can have 10 years experience, 10 years after qualification, and you're still referred to as a junior. Surely that's pretty archaic.
Yeah, I think the junior doctor narrative is a real troubling one for the public view of doctors. Just to put it straight, you are a junior doctor up until the moment you become a consultant. So for many doctors, I graduated from medical school 5 years ago and I'm still a junior doctor. You can be a junior doctor for 10, 12 years, sometimes longer, particularly if you have career breaks to have children or to pursue other interests or anything like that. So, really overnight in hospital when you're having an operation or during the day when you're having brain surgery or a hip replacement, often it's done by junior doctors and they can be very well experienced and in many cases, they may be a few months off from becoming a consultant. So, a junior doctor is anyone from the day they finish medical school up until that point of being a consultant.
Frankie, do you feel as though patients have been forgotten in this whole discussion, though, around the pay for junior doctors? Because we can understand doctors think they should be paid more, and most people would probably agree. You can understand the government's hands are tied, there's limited funds. But in the meantime, we've got waiting lists of something like 7 million post-COVID. We've got 175,000 operations being cancelled last month, and they're saying 250 to 350,000 this week.
Yeah,
it's terrible for patients.
Well, they're not training enough doctors, and those doctors, Frankie, correct me if I'm wrong, are then seeking a better life, better pay and better conditions in Canada, in Australia, in South Africa.
Yeah, there's a real issue with recruitment and retention of doctors. There was a survey done in 2020 that showed that 65% of junior doctors have researched moving abroad to work. Going back to the question of patient safety, it's a real tricky one. We come into this profession to treat patients, and patient care is really at the centre of all that we do. And if you ask any junior doctor, patient care is actually at the centre of these strikes. No one wanted this. As a junior doctor, none of us wanted to strike. But unfortunately, the government have refused to even get into conversations or make an offer that is, make an offer at all, never mind one that's fair. And so I feel like this has been a hand that's been forced. Junior doctors have proposed this, but actually I feel like it's only got to this point because the government have refused to enter into conversations with us. The last strike that was done in March, actually no patient safety was affected because of senior cover, so the consultant stepped in. Yes, some elective procedures have been cancelled, but I think that going forward, this short-term hit and the aftermath of that is actually a better option than what's going to happen to the NHS if more and more doctors leave. You can't train a doctor overnight. It takes 5 or 6 years of medical school, plus all of the training and experience. So I feel like this is a short-term hit for actually longer-term gain to save the NHS workforce.
Well, meanwhile, the NHS chief warning the public to avoid risky behaviour. I mean, how do you define that? Anything could include risky behaviour. You might have a heart attack because you've been eating inappropriate foods or whatever. I mean, what do you do this week?
Heart attack because you're eating inappropriate food.
Well, that's a bad example, but, you shouldn't drink alcohol because you might have an accident. What's risky? You shouldn't go to the playground with your child because that's risky and they might break their arm. I mean, quite frankly, to say to the public...
Everything's risky.
Well, exactly, that's my point.
Yeah. What I think is just saying is, for the public to be sensible. We do get some people coming to A&E that have had completely unavoidable injuries. Of course, things like heart attacks and strokes and other medical emergencies aren't avoidable. And I urge anyone that does need medical care or emergency care over the next few days to still come to hospital. The hospitals have had enough time to plan for this, and it is being covered by senior doctors and consultants that are not junior doctors. So if anyone does need medical attention over the next few days, then hospitals are still open and emergency services are on.
OK. Big debate. Frankie, thank you very much indeed for putting us in the picture, setting the scene for us today. That'll continue into the weekend, that strike. Thank you for the moment. Thank you. Appreciate it. 9 minutes past 6.
Now, police in Northern Ireland have condemned the violence against its officers as senseless and reckless after petrol bombs were thrown during a Republican parade in Derry, Londonderry.
It comes ahead of the American President Joe Biden's arrival in Belfast tonight, where he will meet with the Prime Minister.
Well, joining us now for more on this is our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie. And I suppose, Doogie, this is a painful reminder of just how fragile the situation is in Northern Ireland to have violence like we've seen on the eve of the President of the United States arriving to commemorate the Good Friday Agreement.
Yes, it is all very ironic, it must be said. But this was one of 94 parades that took place over the weekend. It must be said that this parade wasn't an official parade, and by that, what happens in Northern Ireland when you want to hold a parade, it has to go towards the Parades Commission, who will then grant it that it can go or not, and this one, of course, wasn't. But that's not unusual. That happens every Easter Monday, and it is known as the Dissidents' Parade. These are mainly from the Cregan area of Derry, Londonderry, and it has to be looked at in real context. These are young men that were very much left behind by the Good Friday Agreement. Young men right across Northern Ireland that didn't fit into that academic education box. In fact, that could be said of a lot of the UK. Those young men now coming to age and there's no manufacturing and so forth for them. They are looking for some sort of life outside of schooling, and unfortunately they seem to be going down a wrong road. This was a monitoring project by the PSNI yesterday. One of their Land Rovers, you will notice, has been attacked in that skirmish yesterday. It was hit by petrol bombs. It does look very spectacular, but we have seen that many, many times here in Northern Ireland. They are known as snatch Land Rovers, and on the top of them is CCTV cameras, very high quality cameras. They can see in the dark and pick up a lot of high information, and of course there will be many arrests over the next few days in connection with those attacks. ACC Bobby Singleton very much said that this was going to happen. They were expecting it and wouldn't go into it. Of course, Joe Biden arriving here today, well, later on this evening, where he will meet Rishi Sunak. It is expected that he will then go to the University of Ulster on Wednesday before he travels to Louth.
Cheers, Dougie. Thank you very much indeed. Dougie, we'll talk to you again throughout the programme. Thank you very much indeed. Well, ahead of Joe Biden's visit, our deputy political editor, Tom Harwood, has been looking back on the effort to achieve peace in Ireland.
Joe Biden is in Northern Ireland. But why does America see herself as the guardian of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement? And what does this visit say about UK-US relations? The United States claims a strong historic connection with Ireland due to her large Irish-American population. Migration from the island of Ireland played a formative part of the American story in the 19th century, and today over 10% of Americans claim Irish heritage, including the current president. Perhaps because of this, during the 3 decades of the Troubles, transatlantic relations became strained on numerous occasions, not least on St. Patrick's Day in 1976, when US presidential candidate Jimmy Carter wore a badge that read "England out of Ireland." Yet by 1987, the House of Representatives in the States voted through an aid package of $250 million to Northern Ireland. And by the 1990s, the US and UK were working far more closely on matters of security. From the Gulf War to Kosovo, British and American security interests were more aligned. And the Blair-Clinton friendship, as well as ideological kinship, formed a basis for cooperation. Clinton saw himself as an unaligned peacemaker, although many in Ulster were suspicious given his decision to grant a US visa to Gerry Adams. In 1995, Bill Clinton became the first US president to visit Northern Ireland, with his visit a strong sign in the ongoing peace process, at that time being worked on by John Major's government. Clinton in his visit urged dialogue, calling on nationalists and unionists to engage in constructive conversations. His visit paved the way for the former US Senator George Mitchell to become the chairman of the peace talks that eventually led to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. And on the 10th of April 1998, the agreement was signed. The summation of decades of diplomatic work between the British, American and Irish governments, beginning an era of peace and camaraderie both Sunak and Biden will seek to maintain during this week's visit. Tom Harwood, GB News.
So what can we expect from the meeting between Joe Biden and Rishi Sunak? Joining us now for more analysis is the Daily Express political reporter Millie Cook. Millie, Joe Biden particularly, he will want to be there, not just for historical reasons, but he's a big claim to Ireland. He likes to play up his Irish roots, doesn't he?
Yeah, so Joe Biden heading to Ireland this evening. He himself has Irish heritage, so he's going to arrive in Northern Ireland tonight for a whirlwind visit and then move on to the Republic for a few days. He himself has long been putting pressure on the UK and the EU to kind of resolve tensions in Northern Ireland. So kind of in the coming days, it's very likely that we will see some kind of intervention from Joe Biden on this issue, whether it's behind the scenes or some kind of public intervention. He's very likely to be putting pressure on unionist parties in Northern Ireland to return to Stormont.
But Millie, the elephant in the room in all of this, I suppose, is the fact that this Windsor framework, which is very much Rishi Sunak's baby and he's very proud of it, will only work if Stormont is sitting. And the fact that President Biden will not even be visiting Stormont, because let's be honest, there's nothing to see, there's nobody there. I mean, how embarrassing is that?
It doesn't look good. And I think the key thing here is that Rishi Sunak hasn't been able to persuade parties in Stormont that the Windsor framework that he's worked so hard on does anything to really protect the union. So their current objection to it is that EU law still applies in Northern Ireland and not the rest of the UK. So that really seems like a wedge driving a kind of a gap down the middle of the union.
Yet, ironically, peace has never been so fragile than it is at the moment. And we saw that violence in Derry yesterday at that fringe Republican parade. So these extremists on the edge of republicanism, they're very keen to show, and they did demonstrate yesterday, that they are not happy.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, so while Biden's visit obviously is timed for the anniversary of the peace process, it comes at a time where there are kind of more tensions in Northern Ireland than we've seen in a few years. So, but partly that also underscores the significance of the visit for Biden, because if he can be seen to play some kind of role in brokering a return to Stormont or progress on the peace process in Northern Ireland again, that will be a massive diplomatic win for him, because when the Good Friday Agreement was signed 25 years ago, it was a major win for the Clinton administration. So if Biden can do that all over again when it's so fragile in Northern Ireland, that would be a major foreign policy win.
And what do you think the chances are that he can do that?
I think currently it's looking slim, given the unionists' major objection to the Windsor framework. And obviously the EU and the UK have both been trying really hard to resolve these issues with pressure from the US. So I don't necessarily believe that a visit will suddenly change all of that, but obviously only time will tell.
Now, the President will be in Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. Will the Prime Minister, will he travel to the Republic of Ireland, do we know?
Currently, I'm not sure we know whether he's going to be making a visit. I imagine it's likely that he will make an appearance, given the significance of Biden's visit. And obviously, Rishi Sunak's keen to show his special relationship with Biden, so it's very likely that he will make an effort to appear and kind of be seen to be in talks with Biden.
Well, it seems we're going to be giving some British and Irish weather to President Biden. He's arriving just as a yellow weather warning is arriving, which we'll be talking about later on in the programme. But a storm will be welcoming him, which hopefully won't be too much of a headline writer's nightmare. Millie Cook, thank you very much indeed for your analysis this morning.
Thank you. The time, 18 minutes past 6. Let's bring you up to date with what else is happening news-wise.
Keir Starmer is planning to launch more adverts attacking the Prime Minister, with the next one blaming him for crashing the economy. The Labour leader says Rishi Sunak's fingerprints are all over struggling household budgets. It follows the party's original ad, which accused the Prime Minister of not wanting child sex abusers to go to prison.
In America, a man who shot 5 colleagues dead has been identified as 23-year-old Connor Sturgeon. 9 other people, including a police officer, were wounded in the attack, which took place at a bank in Louisville, Kentucky. The gunman was shot dead at the scene.
More than 150 pubs across England and Wales have shut for good over the first 3 months of this year. It follows rising energy bills and food prices, as well as weakened consumer demand. The British Beer and Pub Association predicts the average energy bill for a pub could rise by over £18,000 a year from this month.
See, those pubs, once they're gone, they're gone.
I know.
And they're not just drinking dens. I mean, they bring people together in a community. They're very, very good for that. And then what happens to them? Apartments. They're knocked down and they're made into care homes and apartments and don't know what else. It's like petrol stations. We just see those disappearing off the streets.
Well, I have to say, I did do my best to try and support the pub industry
sure you
over
did.
the Easter holidays. And actually, the local pub, we were in the West Country for Easter, which was absolutely gorgeous. And the local pub did an Easter egg hunt for the children. So it was exactly that, a community hub. We were 3 generations, children were running around, grown-ups were having a lovely time.
Grown-ups get
Very
sozzled.
merry.
Kids
Very
get
merry.
very merry, which is very good. But pubs, what will we do without them? But the other thing I want to say about alcohol, if another person, I'm not a drinker, but if another adult friend of mine phones me and said, oh, I feel awful today, oh, it's a write-off today, I got wasted over the weekend, why do you do it?
I've never done that to you.
I didn't say. Did I say?
I just didn't want the viewers or listeners to think that you were discussing me.
No.
Who are you talking about?
I'm talking about various other individuals who have phoned me and they get, Easter Monday's a write-off because they're sozzled or they've got this terrible hangover and whatever.
It's worth it, probably. That's what they'd argue.
Do you think it's worth it?
I can't cope with a hangover. No, I hate hangovers.
No, I can't. I have this phobia about vomiting. So therefore, I couldn't drink.
Yeah,
I couldn't.
I'm actually. I could 3 drinks and that's my night done.
Yeah.
Cheap date.
So if you feel merry, that's okay. But why just go overboard and why ruin the next day? Why do you do it? Let us know. Stay with us, and we'll bring you the latest on this storm, Antoni, the first named storm of the season. You could have fooled me, but anyway. It's 60-mile-per-hour winds all over the British Isles from today.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Looking ahead on the programme, still to come this morning.
A new report shows people are cutting back on groceries and eating out, but they're spending more on streaming services like Netflix or Disney+. So at 7:20, we'll be asking if we're being swindled on our subscriptions.
What do they mean, swindled? What, they're charging too much?
I don't know.
Then at 7:45, we'll be marking World Parkinson's Day, raising awareness for the world's fastest growing neurological condition. People like Jeremy Paxman, Michael J. Fox speaking out about living with Parkinson's. If you've got a story to tell, let us know. But that whole thing about, obviously it's very expensive to eat out. Obviously those delivery apps are horrendously expensive. I don't know how they get away with it. I don't know how people afford to order deliveries. But subscriptions for streaming services.
I just cancelled one.
Well, I agree with you. I'm sitting looking. Why is everything a plus? Plus, Paramount Plus, Disney Plus, Amazon
We just
Plus.
decided it was too much and
You don't need, and I look at it and I think, do I need to sign on to see some blooming series that I'm not going to be interested in anyway? So I'm with you. I think, tell them to stick their streaming services. Yeah, too many of them. There's too much TV, too many channels. It hasn't been good. I thank God that I grew up in the 70s and 80s where I actually could invest in programs, understand programs. There was a communal need to watch on a Friday night or a Monday night or whatever it happens to be. I could tell you now, if you asked me about certain programs, I could tell you what time they were on and what channel they were on.
I remember watching Soldier. That was like a national obsession when I was a teenager. And then there was Pride and Prejudice, where everyone would sit down at 9 o'clock to watch it. Never happens like that anymore.
No, I mean, I can remember Star Trek at 8 o'clock on a Monday night. 8 o'clock BBC One on a Monday night, Star Trek. I mean, that's when TV was TV.
Although,
the High Chaparral.
Without GB News, you know, what's all you need these days? Get rid of all the subscriptions and just tune in to us.
Yeah, I think there's far too much TV, far too many channels, and none of us really. It's when you say to somebody, "Did you see that last night?" No, I didn't. No, who ever sees anything anyway. Spread the word. Tell everybody we're on until 9:30 this morning.
Right, the Met Office has implemented yellow weather warnings for wind as the UK is set for its first named storm of the season.
Now, this one is called Storm Antoni. I don't know what difference it makes.
It's written, it's hard to tell from the way you say it, but it sounds sort of, you know, Antoni with an I. I feel like it needs a bit of a sing-song delivery.
Well, it wasn't named from Britain, I would say. But anyway, let's find out. We have got... we haven't got anybody. We haven't got anybody to talk about
and
this.
It's blown out the internet connection to our next guest. But according to one of the papers this morning, cyclonic winds are about to arrive in Tornado, Britain, which sounds suitably dramatic for the arrival of the president. But yes, apparently this is off the back of El Nino. Over the Atlantic. So we're expecting these winds, and it's going to be down in the southwest that's worst affected, up through Wales and a little bit of Ireland and Northern Ireland, Southern Ireland as well.
Yeah, so there'll be a bit of effect on that one tomorrow as well. I don't agree with all this business of we're not cretinous enough that we need a name. Need to call it Mary and Stephen.
Well, I do agree with you that I'm surprised it's the first named one of the season. I feel like we're forever naming them, but it's Groundhog Day with the storms, isn't it? Look, we can't get Jim Dale. We'll try and reconnect to that line.
Jim Dale, he was great.
He was wonderful.
In the Carry On films.
I missed that.
What? Do you not remember Jim Dale in the Carry On films? But he was an actor. He was also a singer as well, Jim Dale. but he's also a meteorologist as well. Jim Dill is good to go. He is a senior meteorologist. And Jim, we've got you. We've established a connection as well. So Antoni with an I on the end of it. Where did that one originate from?
I didn't quite hear the back of your question there, but I would say to you, first of all, good morning. And
good morning.
Yeah, the doors have opened to the Atlantic. They opened yesterday with that rain and all the showers we got yesterday. So today we've got Antoni. Now, at the moment, the Met Office have not actually named this storm. So there's a bit of a community discussion going on whether they should, because this is not dissimilar to the one we saw in 2019, Hannah, late April, that brought 60, 70 mile an hour winds to Wales particularly. So, look, we've got some time yet, but this is a downhill today. And this particular storm that's coming in, that's going to affect mainly the west and the southwest and the south, but it's going to take 24 to 36 hours. So a windy time to come. Yeah, there you go. The yellow warnings at this moment in time. At British Weather Services, we've got amber warnings. So a little bit more. So yeah, this day is going to go downwards, and it's going to go all the way into tomorrow with the rain tonight, and then the winds that follow.
What causes this, Jim? What are the conditions that lead to wind?
Yeah, just when you thought it was all over, Eamonn, it's not, is it? We're back in it. I will give you some good news in a second, but what causes it? The jet stream coming back in. So that's the upper air winds that control the low pressure areas, and basically it's just the standard thing that we get from time to time. We had a lot of it in March without necessarily the velocity of too much wind anyway, but this one's got some stature to it. I would expect 60 mile an hour winds in the exposed places, particularly Wales and the southwest and then the south coast tomorrow. So, yeah, good reasons behind it. But the good news is that this time next week we'll be sitting there and thinking, where has all that gone? Because we're going to be sat in 20, 21 degrees, so
really?
70 degrees in old money all the way through the week. Yeah, there you go. Good news.
That is good news. That makes me so happy, because this Easter weekend, apart from yesterday, has been such a glimpse of what's to come, and I just feel so much happier when the sun is shining. We've just got to get through this week. I suppose the world's eyes will be on Northern Ireland, won't they, today, with President Biden arriving. How bumpy is his landing going to be in Air Force One, do you think?
Good question. What time does he land? Do you know, Isabel?
Well, I have a feeling 5 o'clock, but there's some speculation it could be later. I can't remember. This evening.
All right, look, there's a couple of things going off. Joe Biden landing, and then there's a match at the Etihad, which Eamonn will love, of course. I'm a City fan, he's a United fan, so it's the way it goes. Look, yeah, it's going to be rocky. The winds will be up by then, and the rain with it. So a bit of a wild and windy match and a bit of a wild and windy landing for him. So not the greatest of weather, but maybe traditional for Ireland. They seem to get a lot of rain, and that's where it's first going to come. So yeah, it's a developing situation. So I think he's going to be rocked around. What I should say is, yeah, we've got some nice weather coming next week. Looking ahead, we're having a discussion now about the summertime, and we've got an El Nino that's starting up. This is the ocean current off the East Pacific, Peru and Ecuador way. That's starting to bubble up, replacing La Nina, which has got connotations for big heat, not necessarily for ourselves, but for Southern Europe and California and places like this, and floods in other places. A big climate sort of instigator, this one. Bit of that with some climate change thrown in and the right synoptics, and we might well be seeing back revisiting some very hot conditions during the summertime. But for now, we have to put up with hopefully the Met Office will name it finalist Antoni as it comes in today.
And Jim, just briefly, what is the window period for this? When does it start? When does it finish?
Yeah, it's going to start later this afternoon, I think, and it goes through this evening tonight. It probably won't kick out of the East Coast probably until later tomorrow. So you see, it's a fairly long fuse, this one. So people walking in woods and whatever. Look, places not to go. We've seen the trees that happened in the Masters that fell down. Similar sort of wind. So be careful out there. Things are going to blow around. I know people have brought out their barbecues and this and that for the summer. Time to stow them away until next week.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed.
Well,
thank you. Stay with us. We're going to be discussing the Queen's wish to have sent William and Harry both to war as we go through the papers with Norman Baker and Emily Carver.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, The People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
It's nearly 25 to 7. Let's bring you up to date with this morning's front pages.
Let's start with the Times, shall we? Patients are likely to face a month of disruption as junior doctors begin their 4-day strike today.
Here's the Express. It says, don't get ill, as they warn you that the walkout by junior medics will have a catastrophic impact on health services.
The Telegraph is focusing on Joe Biden's journey to Northern Ireland today as he prepares to meet leaders from all 5 of the country's main political parties.
The Mail, 19 terror suspects among Channel arrivals, they say. And The Sun says...
The Queen wanted William and Harry to join the war in Afghanistan.
And let's go through those stories and much more. We do that in the company of Norman Baker and Emily Carver. Very nice to see you both.
Shall we start with that royal story, since we finished on it there with the front pages, Norman? This is a bit of a breach of protocol on behalf of the former head of the army by divulging a private conversation between him and the Queen. But I suppose nothing to lose. The Queen has passed away. He's no longer in that role, and he's decided it's worth splashing to the ITV about it all.
I mean, on the basis that one doesn't talk about conversations with the Queen or the monarch, that's the correct protocol. Having said that, then all royal matters are at the Royal Archives are sealed since 1952, so we could perhaps be a bit more open than we are in this country. However, on the story itself, we've got conflicting stories in the papers because the Sun front page, which we've covered, says Queen send Wills and Harry to war, whereas the Mirror on page 7 says send Harry off to war, but not Wills. So there appears to be a contradiction there. What the Queen was supposed to have said is that they've taken a shilling and they've got to do their duty. And in a sense, I think that's right. I mean, they shouldn't be exempt from that in the way that other members of the armed forces are. If they've signed up, then you should be prepared to...
Well, except that would they not perhaps be a target because of who they are and therefore at particular risk?
Well, Harry would have been a target and Prince Andrew would have been a target at the Falkland Islands, but nevertheless, the view taken apparently was that Harry could go, but Wolsey couldn't because he was the heir to the throne. But the thing that I would just say in passing is that I don't know why members of the royal family always have to be subject to training at Sandhurst and so on and be in the army. I've no objection to being in the army if that's what they want to do, but I don't think it should be it should be obligatory, it seems to me, that they go through this process if they end up being born into the royal family.
It'll be interesting to see what they decide to do with George and Charlotte and Louis.
It will.
So to the doctor strikes, front page of the Times amongst many papers covering this, Emily.
Yes, the Times is going on the angle that the timing of these strikes is to cause maximum disruption because it's been the bank holiday when they're already under a lot of pressure, also because the hospitals, many hospitals, haven't recovered from the strikes in March. So there's a huge amount of pressure. We know that NHS chiefs are saying we need to avoid risky behaviour as a result, whatever that means, and that we need to use the NHS, well, essentially sparingly. We've been told that before, but there we go. We're being given this advice once again. And the number of appointments that will be cancelled ranges between 250,000 to 350,000. That's the estimate.
Yeah, but it's a strike. You know, all this woe is me, people are going to suffer. Yeah, we get all that. That's the point of the strike, to make it relevant. So at the end of the day, why doesn't this government just take responsibility and say we are going to train enough doctors for the system, we're going to fund the system correctly, and everybody will be happy at the end of the day?
Well, I would like to see from the BMA too some discussion of how to make the NHS better long term, looking at how to improve it. At the moment, the concern seems to be about, well, they're asking for this 35% pay increase, and that seems to be the biggest ask. I think there does need to be constructive talks from doctors, from NHS chiefs about how to make the service better for everyone, because at the moment, as you say, it's not serving patients nor doctors, it seems. But I do think the union has perhaps radicalised some of these doctors. I don't believe a few years ago they would have taken essentially bartering with human life here. Cancer appointments delayed. If you're waiting for a cancer appointment and it's put on hold again and again and again, is that right, even if junior doctors feel they're underpaid? I don't think so.
I found a letter that was yesterday in the paper, which I think is worth reading out. This is from the former Dean of Medicine at Bristol University. He said, at Bristol University, medical students took responsibility for writing the Bristol Promise. It ended by saying, "I'll work for the good of all persons whose health may be placed in my care and for the public well-being." He said, "It's a magnificent piece of theatre when all the students stand during their graduation ceremony to recite their promise. Sadly, for some of today's young doctors, that is as far as it goes, just theatre."
Look, I mean, there's fault on both sides here. I mean, a 35% pay increase is completely unrealistic, to be honest with you. Yes, there's an historical problem. Over many years, they've been falling behind inflation, but you can't expect the government to sort that out in one bash. But secondly, the Health Secretary, Stephen Barclay, is wrong, in my view, to refuse to meet them and negotiate sensibly and wait for them to call off their strike. I mean, both of them are playing with the public in this regard. Also, the thing about people losing their appointments, of course, there's going to be people suffering. People may even die as a consequence of this action. But the doctors themselves will argue that people are dying anyway because there's insufficient money in the health service and insufficient number of doctors.
Well, you shouldn't actively try to compound the problem.
No, but they would argue, I'm not taking their side necessarily, but they would argue that unless you draw attention to this, it will only get worse by default in any case.
I think some of their campaigning has been ill-advised. For example, going on about how they're paid less per hour than someone working at Pret and things. If you take most people's salary per hour, it does look quite low, up to quite a high amount, because obviously you're expected to work, 40 hours a week plus. So I think that sometimes it does look a bit...
Well, so as a doctor, you work 20 hours a day and that makes it OK?
Well, no, but I do think a lot of salaries do look poor when you put them down to the hourly rate.
Poor.
But if you look at doctors' salaries, they do go up every single year, and you can earn lots and lots of money. We do have an issue, obviously, with doctors moving abroad, I'm not against them getting a pay rise, but I think the action here is actually possibly unforgivable, because you are putting lives at risk, and that is why they're doing it.
If you were the trade union negotiator, how would you suggest that the doctors build up their negotiating power? How would you settle this in your favour?
Well, I don't know, but I don't think strike action is the right way to do it.
OK. Let us know your views at home, folks. We'll appreciate that.
Norman, let's go to the front of the Mail. 19 suspected terrorists have arrived in Britain via small boats across the Channel. This is the likes of Al-Shabaab and what was the other? Is it ISIS?
Yes, I mean, look, I've no doubt that some terrorist suspects are arriving on boats, but they're also arriving on scheduled flights. They're coming into this country with visas and passports and becoming, and they are terrorists themselves. There are terrorists here in this country who have been born in this country. And I'm aware of former colleagues in the House of Commons who have either been assassinated, in David Amos's case, or alternatively subject to attack like Nigel Jones's office, the MP for Cheltenham. So, you know, we have these people in society, whether they come in on boats or whether they come in on scheduled flights or whether they're here anyway. And the thing about the Mail, yes, of course we must try and make sure we screen people properly who come into the country. But the implication from the Mail front page is this is what is happening all the time. What they don't say, of course, is that the vast majority of people who arrive in this country claiming refugee status have their cases examined and the refugee status is granted.
But it's also easier to claim a right to stay if you come by boat across the Channel. Most suspected terrorists would be picked up if they were taking a flight. I think there's much more of a risk when it comes to Channel crossings than there is for flights.
If they know them.
There's more security, and you need a passport to fly. You don't need a passport to get in a dinghy and cross the Channel. So I think that's a bit... this is obviously more of a security risk.
Well, it's a risk in the sense that you don't have to have a passport, but there's plenty of evidence of people who've got passports who've committed crimes, including terrorist crimes.
Of course.
OK. Emily, front page of the Times for you here.
Oh, yes.
Giving police chiefs the power to sack rogue officers would result in what?
Yes, so essentially it changed. It used to be the commissioner who was able to sack police officers. Now it's the legally qualified chairs who oversee who's sacked. If there's a rogue police officer, they oversee it. And this article is arguing that the number of police officers being sacked has dropped as a result of this. And this was one of the changes Theresa May brought in when she was Home Secretary. Now the Commissioner is arguing, no, he should have the power to sack more police officers. Of course, we're waiting for Suella Braverman to announce her reforms for the police, which should be coming quite soon.
Yeah.
This may be one of them.
Yeah, I mean, former Home Office Minister, your
Well,
thoughts?
I mean, look, I mean, any employer should be able to sack one of their workforce, and I think the Commissioner therefore should have the right to sack police officers. If the Commissioner sacks police officers unfairly, then they can go to Industrial Tribunal claiming unfair dismissal. That's the way it should work.
All right, Norman, let's go to these attack ads that are unrelenting from Labour, now to be focusing on living costs and, I think, on sort of bills and policies that have been brought
Well, look, I mean, I think this is really juvenile politics, and it's really stupid for the Labour Party to, or Keir Starmer, to go down this particular road. And there are arguments about, you know, I happen to think the Tories have been quite poor government, and you can attack the Conservatives as a party, but to try and pin things on Rishi Sunak when he wasn't even an MP, it's just frankly ludicrous.
You know, somebody's got to take responsibility for policy somewhere down the line.
They should say this is what you should do in future. Or they should say the Conservatives have failed over so many years. But what they cannot say, which they have been done, these ridiculous attack ads. Do you think an adult convicted of possessing a gun with intent to harm should go to prison? Rishi Sunak doesn't. Of course he does. I mean, it's ludicrous to say he doesn't think that. I don't want to end up defending the Conservatives, I might say, but I mean, the way Labour have put this is just juvenile politics. And we're now in an edifying auction to the bottom to see which party said it can lock most people up for longest. That's
Norman, very American approach. I mean, if we were sitting in America watching television ads going on, they'd be much stronger than that.
Well, I hope we don't go down that particular road.
We already have, don't you? Don't you think that politics is incredibly divisive in a sort of divided democracy, the way America has been for...
It needn't be that way. I mean, I would say in America, well, you've got two parties, and I have to say, not just because I'm a Lib Dem, but you've actually got a plurality of parties in this country, including the SNP, the Lib Dems, the Greens, and so on. And you don't have that kind of argy-bargy in the same way as you do in America. You've got different views coming forward. But this kind of gutter politics that Keir Starmer's engaging in, I mean, I think first of all, it is unfair and not right. I think it doesn't do Labour any good. I think it's damaging for them.
Some of the Lib Dem leaflets are pretty feisty, pretty vicious.
Well, we don't have this sort of leaflet, but I mean, I think that there are leaflets from all parties which are probably ones that wouldn't be defensible. But this is just bringing politics to the gutter.
Well, Keir Starmer's very unapologetic about it, isn't he?
He is, and I think he should... When you're in a hole, you stop digging. It's my advice to him.
I think they're going to double down.
I think cost of living might play better, actually.
Well,
because he was the Chancellor.
Exactly, that's right. He has got some responsibility for that. But, I mean, some of the things which they're saying that he has crashed the economy. No, he hasn't. It was Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng who crashed the economy, not Rishi Sunak. Rishi Sunak's come in and stabilised it.
Lockdowns.
Look, he didn't handle everything properly. He wasted a lot of money on PPE equipment and everything else. So there are lines of attack which are perfectly fair. But he didn't crash the economy. This is ridiculous politics.
So what is the slogan? Just I want the viewers and listeners to see what they think of it. So the slogan says what?
Well, I don't know if your camera can pick that up, but this particular one here, if I can read it upside down.
Do you think an adult convicted of possessing a gun with intent to harm should go to prison? OK, so your instinct, and then it says Rishi Sunak doesn't. Your view on that, let us know. Now, Joe Biden, he'll be coming in, he'll be having a shillelagh and a Guinness. He'll be photographed with that, and he'll be having leprechauns all around him and whatever. He loves his Irish connections, so his Northern Irish visit. What purposefully can he achieve? What do you make of his landing in Belfast later today?
Well, presumably he's going to be encouraging all leaders to break the power sharing deadlock and for the DUP to end their boycott of Stormont. I imagine that's what he's going to say. But he'll only be in Northern Ireland for less than 24 hours. The Financial Times is essentially giving a bit of context to his trip, saying this comes off the back of the Windsor Framework. We'll see what he has to say about that. And obviously there's been a little bit of scuffles, a little bit of violence, but thankfully no deaths yesterday on Easter Monday. So yes, it's just giving a little bit of context in the Financial Times on why he's coming.
And it won't work.
It won't work.
I'll tell you why it won't work. It's because the DUP is keeping out of power sharing not because of Brexit or because of the Northern Ireland Framework. It's keeping out of that because they lost the election and Sinn Féin will be the First Minister. That's why they're keeping out of it.
Yeah. Also, we've got the extreme republicanism which demonstrated itself yesterday in Derry with those petrol bombs. And basically, he'll not be able to appease those people either.
No, he won't. I mean, look, I'm glad he's there, and it's important that the American president, who genuinely supports Ireland and has got Irish background, comes across and tries to do what he can. And he won't do any harm. He might do a bit of good on the edges. But there are extremists on both sides of the divide who will not pay attention to him. And the situation does look fragile compared to how it was.
It'll be interesting to see how much he talks up the Windsor Framework, if at all.
Yeah, well, it's difficult to do it, isn't it, in the current context?
Emily, Norman, thank you both very much indeed. The guy's going to be back in about 45 minutes' time. Meanwhile, we will bring you up to date with the time at 10 minutes to 7 with what else is happening.
And as we've been discussing, thousands of junior doctors are about to begin their 4-day strike in what's being described as the most disruptive industrial action in NHS history. Members of the British Medical Association are asking for a 35% pay rise to, they say, resolve the recruitment and retention crisis. Around 350,000 appointments will be cancelled as a result of the walkouts.
The American president will visit Northern Ireland, as we've been discussing this evening, to mark the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. Joe Biden will meet with Stormont's main political parties. That's happening in Belfast.
We're cutting back on groceries and eating out, but we're spending more on TV subscriptions. That's according to Barclays figures that show spending on digital content and subscriptions was up 4.1% last month. That's the highest year-on-year rise in 5 months.
So Johnny has got in touch today and says, Eamonn, I'm like you. I'm glad I grew up in the 80s before streaming services. We used to wait once a week for the next episode.
Oh, can't do that. I can't wait a week.
That was a family treat. And we all got the video Blockbuster. We went to the video store,
that?
Blockbuster.
Oh, that was brilliant.
Yeah.
Or we were reminiscing something about the Love films. Do you remember when they used to come in the post? A little DVD. Did you ever do that, Love film?
No, but you ordered your video in the post?
Yes.
Right,
and then
OK.
it would arrive. I think that became Netflix.
No food order apps. You got a pizza for a takeaway or fish and chips, but at more affordable prices. Look at that.
Yeah, I wasn't going to read that bit out.
Look at that bit.
No, I think we'll just avoid that bit. It says, Eamonn, we think you'll make a great Prime Minister, but I don't know what Johnny's on about.
Anyway. But anyway, keep those views coming in. Oh, 1 minute. John, 1 minute. Linda, on the subject of too many streaming channels, you're lucky if you don't need them. When there's repeats on the mainstream channels, they're very useful. I'm an avid watcher of GBNews throughout the day, but sometimes a good film or series is a diversion in the evenings.
Oh.
Yeah, but, you know, the iPlayer.
I watched a very good film last night.
Yeah, but I watched the same film. I
didn't like
find
it. The ending was rubbish, but Stillwater, if any of you see it. Matt Damon, based in Marseille.
Yeah.
Thought it was interesting.
I started watching on a streaming service last night. Sylvester Stallone in, is it Tulsa King? Tulsa, I think it's Tulsa King or King of Tulsa. Tulsa King. That's it. It was quite interesting. It was
Apparently,
quite
that's
good.
On Paramount Plus.
Well, it's all plus.
Oh,
it's all plus,
you
plus,
and your
plus.
extra.
Plus, no, but I'm going to get rid of them all. It's ridiculous. All this, you don't need them. You don't need them. We don't want them. And nobody knows when anything's on, and no one watches the same things at the same time anymore. Bruce Springsteen had a song, hadn't he? 82 channels and nothing on. That's pretty typical. And as I always say, you'll miss the BBC when it's gone.
Yeah,
when you get rid of it.
Yeah.
Because what do you pay for all... You know, you pay whatever it is, 130 odd quid for the BBC a year, but you pay for what, a streaming channel, at least 8 quid a month. You know, and you have to have 5 or 6 of them. Anyway, a new £250,000 maternity bereavement unit has opened at York Hospital. Now, this is thanks to the fundraising efforts of bereaved parents and the work of a charity called SANS.
Well, the Butterfly Suite gives families somewhere that they can feel safe and cared for after the tragedy of losing a baby, as Anna Riley reports.
Donna and her partner Matthew's baby girl Olivia was born sleeping at 9 months old, just moments before her planned caesarean on the 26th of June last year. To honour Olivia and to help other grieving families, the couple organised Olivia's Dream charity ball, raising £31,000 for the Butterfly Suite, a new maternity bereavement unit at York Hospital. Their fundraising will go towards the private garden courtyard, where there's a bench in memory of Olivia.
I didn't for a second think about what happens if you lose a baby. It just wasn't something that ever crossed my mind, and in some ways probably a little bit naive, but the moment that happens, it all happens so quickly, and you're just in that instant, you're told there's no heartbeat and everything crumbles. You've got a couple of days to make a lifetime of memories with your baby. These facilities have to be perfect, and it's shockingly over 50 families use that suite every year in York Hospital. So it gets used, and if we could change them figures, that would be amazing. But what we can do is we can make sure that them families are well looked after and they have the space and the facilities to be looked after.
The Butterfly Suite promotes a quiet, welcoming area away from the delivery ward for parents to spend quality time with their baby.
To have a special place for them to be able to spend time with their baby is really important. It's a calming space, but also it provides all the necessary equipment that they need, but also in a homely environment as well. And especially with the added bonus of a garden where they can spend some time outside as a family. That would be really important for families.
The York branch of SANS donated more than £94,600 to the Butterfly Suite. Kim Riley from the Stillbirth and Neonatal Charity knows firsthand the pain of losing a baby and the need for a modern maternity bereavement unit.
I lost my daughter Nicole in 1979. I never even saw her. That's how things were done then. She was taken away, the hospital buried her. I only found her 20 years later, and that's when I got in touch with Bev at York Sands, and that's when my journey with York Sands began. So I've just helped out as much as I possibly can, not wanting other families to go through similar, journeys that I did. So thankfully, we've come a long way from 1979.
1 in every 255 pregnancies in the UK end in stillbirth. While these suites are filled with the grief of bereaved families, their existence provides comfort to those who need it most. Anna Riley, GB News, York.
Minutes now before 7. Please do stay with us.
Yes, we're going to have lots more on what's been called the most disruptive strikes in the history of the NHS as junior doctors walk out for 4 days.
But first, we're talking about a storm coming into the country later today. Greg Dewhurst now has the latest on the yellow weather warnings.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Turning wet and windy over the next 24 hours or so. Met Office wind warnings already in force for today and through into Wednesday. This area of low pressure is going to bring that heavy rain, strong winds. We could see gusts of 50-60 miles an hour possible in places, leading to some disruption, and then it slowly only eases out of the way into Thursday. But it's a cold but bright start this morning, plenty of sunny spells. We do have some showers across parts of Scotland in particular, but as we move through the day, we'll see the stick of cloud and rain moving in from the southwest in association with that area of low pressure, and the winds picking up too, particularly as we move into the afternoon. We'll see gusts of 50-60 miles an hour, and this combined with some heavy rain will lead to some tricky driving conditions. Best of the sunshine holding on further north and east, but temperatures a little disappointing. Into the evening time, this band of rain pushes northeastwards quite quickly, heavy at times, leading some difficult travelling conditions during the rush hour. Bumping up against colder air across Scotland, we could see some snow over the mountains. And then overnight, we'll see the winds ease for a time, but still some showers moving in between clear spells. And this will allow temperatures to dip away 3 or 4 Celsius in the towns and cities. So a chilly start to Wednesday. But it won't be long before the winds start picking up again from the southwest, parts of Wales, southwest England, along some English Channel coast. 50-60 miles an hour plus as possible, combined with some heavy rain, which also may fall as snow over the Welsh mountains. Elsewhere, we will see sunny spells, scattered showers, the winds a little lighter further north, and temperatures really struggling below average for the time of year, 11 or 12 at the very best. They're feeling quite cool into the afternoon. Further showers on Thursday and Friday, some of these heavy and thundery at times, but hopefully something a little drier as we head into the weekend, and temperatures just starting to rise a little bit as well.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hundreds of thousands of operations will be cancelled as the most disruptive strike in the NHS history has just kicked off.
Hello there, very good morning to you. 1 minute past 7, Tuesday the 11th of April. A very good morning to you. This is Breakfast in GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Health leaders have urged the public to avoid risky behaviour from today as junior doctors have begun walkouts. Patients could face a full month of disruption as the NHS struggles to cope with one of the worst strikes in its history.
The American president will meet with leaders from all 5 of Northern Ireland's main political parties on a visit that begins this evening. It's part of a push to restore power sharing.
The trip follows violence in Derry, Londonderry yesterday, with petrol bombs hurled at police during a Republican parade.
And the former head of the British Army has claimed that the Queen wanted both William and Harry to fight the Taliban in Afghanistan, but decided it was too risky to send the future heir to the throne.
And we'd love to hear from you throughout the course of the morning. Get in touch the usual way via Twitter or email, gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Nice to hear from you.
So it is our top story this morning. Hundreds of thousands of operations are to be cancelled as junior doctors across England have begun a 4-day strike.
NHS leaders are warning it could be the most disruptive industrial action in the health service's history, with services affected well into May.
Well, the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says the strike risks patient safety and that the demand for a 35% pay rise is unaffordable.
With junior doctors making up 40% of the medical workforce, millions of patients will be feeling the effects. Joining us now to discuss this is NHS GP Dr. Chris George. Chris, it obviously hasn't got more serious than this over the years. How bad is it?
At the moment, it's really bad for a lot of the junior doctors who are working. They've seen their pay reduced basically by 26% from 2008 to 2009. And what they're asking for really is pay restoration of 35%. And actually, whilst this may sound like a lot of money, for most junior doctor, that's an increase from £14 per hour to £19 per hour. The government have said it's too much, it's unrealistic, but MPs have had a pay increase of about £20,000 over this period of time, which is equivalent of 30%.
We are today, can't genuinely expect the government to take money from elsewhere and give you a 35% pay increase.
Why not? These people save lives, every day, and that's what's taken for granted. Chris, I think the mistake your union is making is by using a percentage figure, saying 35%. You'd be better saying we want a rise from £14 to £18 or £19, and that would go down well. You're just playing into the government's hands on this.
Yeah, so we're trying to show it as a percentage, a decision made by the BMA, but I agree, it's not a huge amount of money from £14 to £18, considering it's only a 35% increase. But yeah, I do take that on board, Eamonn.
Now, let me ask you, I'm assuming, I'm looking at you and I'm thinking he'll be a junior doctor, yeah?
I'm actually a senior doctor, believe it or not. I have a few more grey hairs.
Well, that's good. How many years have you been doing what you're doing to be a senior doctor?
So I've been working in the NHS now for 10 years. I went to medical school for 6 years. So it's a period of about 16 years of training to get me to this point as a GP.
So my point being, you've just become a senior doctor, which, again, is an awful archaic term that you should be 10 years beyond qualification and still regarded as junior.
Exactly. I think that term junior doctor is slightly misleading because it could be anyone from the age of maybe 24 all the way up to about 40, 45 sometimes for a lot of doctors, especially for my female colleagues who've maybe had babies, some PhD, then it does take much longer. So the term doesn't really reflect the true nature of people's position. And junior doctors, the term junior doctor is far too broad, I would say.
I know that GPs like yourself are being offered up to £200 an hour to help out in A&E over the next few days, which is double the normal rate. Is that something that many of your colleagues are taking up to try and help out whilst this crisis is ongoing over the next few days?
So there have been discussions between the BMA and the hospitals to make sure that there's safe staffing levels over this period of time. I myself won't be in A&E, but I know that some of my colleagues will be, making sure that they're covering extra shifts, making sure that patient care is not compromised over this period of time, because that is the most important thing with the strikes, is making sure that people are still well looked after during strike action.
And how difficult is it, sorry, just to pick up on that point, as somebody who will have taken the Hippocratic Oath, as people who commit their daily lives to looking after people's health, how seriously is this taken by those who were on the picket lines today? Because we're hearing some people accusing them of having been brainwashed or militarised by the British Medical Association. They've forgotten what their vocation is. Do you accept any of those criticisms?
No, I don't, Isabel. And the reason why I don't accept that is actually because it's an agonising decision for any doctor to leave the wards, leave patients, and to go on strike. The strike isn't just about pay restoration. It's about making sure that we retain and we continue to recruit doctors. Because what we've seen actually is that there's probably unsafe staffing levels at time on wards in GP practices. And this is because of funding to the NHS, which is largely governed by MPs and the government. So actually it's more dangerous, I would say, to actually have an underfunded NHS than it is for junior doctors to go on strike and work with the BMA to ensure safe staffing levels over this period of time.
OK, Dr. Chris George, appreciate your take on things. Thank you very much indeed. Chris is an NHS GP. He's speaking to us from Cambridgeshire this morning. The time it's coming up to 8 minutes past 7. Police in Northern Ireland have condemned the violence against officers last night as senseless and reckless. Petrol bombs were thrown during a Republican parade in Derry.
Well, it comes ahead of US President Joe Biden's arrival in Belfast this evening, where he'll be meeting with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak.
Well, let's go for more on this to our Northern Irish reporter, Dougie Beattie. A big day in terms of history today. 25 years on, though, Dougie, how would you describe the state of the Good Friday Agreement?
Well, it's definitely clunky, Eamonn. But it always has been since about 2005 when the DUP got voted in on one side and then Sinn Féin on the other, and we had then left and right extremes. And really from that point on, it has clunked along. It had a bit of a revival with the St Andrews Agreement after that, and it has never really been looked at again. And maybe it is time now for it to be re-evaluated and looked at once more, because 25 years on, we have had a pretty good, peaceful time in Northern Ireland inside those 25 years. Those of us that remember it's slightly different. I mean, where I'm standing now, and you will remember this, Eamonn, right behind us, I remember having to go through, when you wanted to go into the centre of Belfast, you had to go through security gates and be checked on the way in. And in fact, the last American president that came here stood right here, Bill Clinton, and switched on the Christmas tree lights, and there was thousands and thousands of people behind us. That's not going to happen this time around with Joe Biden. He's only in tonight, very late on, and then of course he's out of here, down to Mayo, over to Louth, and then he's going to Ballina. If you ever get a chance to visit Ireland, always take in Ballina.
Ballina, OK, that's a good one. Dougie, do you see your right hand? If you just turn your right hand and there's a white building behind you, just look round. You see, just look round, behind the jewellery. Yeah,
there
right. You see the white building where the first car's parked? Yeah?
Yes.
Right. Well, that used to be Top Shop, right? That used to be Top Shop, and it was then became Primark. I used to work there on a Saturday.
I never remember it being Top Shop. I bought my first suit out of Burton's further on down.
Well, Burton's owned Top Shop, so they did. Burton's was round the corner there in Ann Street, I think they were. Yeah. Oh, all the places.
Well, this is very lovely, isn't it, chaps?
Very good. Thank you, Dougie. Cheers. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah. And I introduced Bill Clinton there where Dougie's standing. And there were 100,000 people all around there and down Donegal Place there, and it was history. It really was history.
Was that before or after they tried to arrest you?
That was the same night they tried to arrest me, as I was thrown to the ground by the American Secret Service. As I had to make the boss that I had at the time, even though I was asked to do that, he was in charge of GMTV, and wouldn't give me the next day off work. I mean, how ridiculous. I mean, here was history, and he wouldn't give me the next day off work. So I had to catch, luckily enough, British Midland in those days had a 9:50 p.m. plane from Belfast International. And so I had to run at something like, but Clinton was late as well. So I had to run across the lawn, the front lawn of the Belfast City Hall there. And so as I was running, Secret Service all started speaking down their arms and things. So the president was on the stage. I was running the opposite way, and 3 of them came at me and took me to the ground.
You're lucky you didn't get shot, in all seriousness. You could have been taken out.
Well, the assistant chief constable of the Royal Ulster Constabulary vouched for me, and then it got worse because he said, "It's OK, we know him." And they said, "You know him? He's a terrorist? He's a terrorist? That's how you know him?" No, he says, no, he's on the telly. It's fine.
I heard they ushered you to the airport pronto after that.
I got the plane. I got the plane one night. I got a police escort to the plane one night with James Bond, with Roger Moore. And the thing is, Roger Moore held on to the seat of the car. And I said, what's wrong with you? He says, I hate fast cars. He says,
he's James Bond.
He's James Bond. And we're speeding up to Belfast Airport.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. I had the funniest night crossing that night with Roger Moore on the plane. The tears poured down my face listening to his stories about people. And I said, you've got to put this in a book. And he said, but I would hate if people didn't like me if I told those stories. He was such a lovely man.
You need to put all these stories in a book. You could do a whole book just on some of those flights between Belfast and the UK, because the number of stories you've told me over the years, people clinging on to you in the turbulence, and various other stories that I can't repeat, but just wonderful stories.
That's right, don't repeat them.
I won't.
Now, ahead of Joe Biden's visit, our deputy political editor, Tom Harwood, has been looking back on the effort to achieve peace in Ireland.
Joe Biden is in Northern Ireland. But why does America see herself as the guardian of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement? And what does this visit say about UK-US relations? The United States claims a strong historic connection with Ireland due to her large Irish-American population. Migration from the island of Ireland played a formative part of the American story in the 19th century, and today over 10% of Americans claim Irish heritage, including the current president. Perhaps because of this, during the 3 decades of the Troubles, transatlantic relations became strained on numerous occasions, not least on St. Patrick's Day in 1976, when US presidential candidate Jimmy Carter wore a badge that read "England out of Ireland." Yet by 1987, the House of Representatives in the States voted through an aid package of $250 million to Northern Ireland. And by the 1990s, the US and UK were working far more closely on matters of security. From the Gulf War to Kosovo, British and American security interests were more aligned. And the Blair-Clinton friendship, as well as ideological kinship, formed a basis for cooperation. Clinton saw himself as an unaligned peacemaker, although many in Ulster were suspicious given his decision to grant a US visa to Gerry Adams. In 1995, Bill Clinton became the first US president to visit Northern Ireland, with his visit a strong sign in the ongoing peace process, at that time being worked on by John Major's government. Clinton in his visit urged dialogue, calling on nationalists and unionists to engage in constructive conversations. His visit paved the way for the former US Senator George Mitchell to become the chairman of the peace talks that eventually led to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. And on the 10th of April 1998, the agreement was signed. The summation of decades of diplomatic work between the British, American and Irish governments, beginning an era of peace and camaraderie both Sunak and Biden will seek to maintain during this week's visit. Tom Harwood, GB News.
So what can we expect from that meeting between Joe Biden and Rishi Sunak? Joining us now for more analysis is the Daily Express's political reporter, Millie Cook. Good morning to you, Millie. Look, Tom Harwood there talking about the peace that's been enjoyed for a quarter of a century now, but I suppose never more fragile than it is now. We've recently seen the terror threat being increased, haven't we?
Mm-hmm. So while Joe Biden is visiting Northern Ireland on the anniversary of the peace process, he's visiting at a time which has seen massively increased tensions in Northern Ireland as a result of issues with the protocol in recent months and years, to be honest. So it's very likely that we will see Joe Biden kind of trying to push his weight around a bit to try and resolve some of those tensions while he's there.
Do you think he will be able to perhaps improve things with Stormont?
I mean, it's been going on since 2021 and there's been very little progress despite efforts from the EU and the UK and also behind-the-scenes pressure from the United States. So there are major issues with the Windsor Framework, which is newly signed, so the unionist parties just don't see it as doing enough to protect the union. So it does seem unlikely at this point that there'll be a major change in attitude in the coming days.
I mean, he may not be able to solve it, but will it actually be a bit embarrassing, do you think, for Rishi Sunak? Because the Windsor Framework, I suppose, is arguably his biggest achievement to date, and yet it can't even be implemented unless Stormont is sitting, because it all hinges on this Stormont break, which enables them to veto anything that they don't like coming in from EU legislation. So it's kind of like the elephant in the room, isn't it?
So it is embarrassing for Rishi to some extent because he kind of has peddled this as a major win for him. But without the DUP sitting at Stormont, it doesn't really do enough to fix the issues with the protocol because the fact that Stormont wasn't functioning was the main problem. So the Windsor framework, it just hasn't really done enough to persuade unionist parties that the union will be protected.
What about Rishi Sunak? Obviously, he'll be greeting and welcoming the president as he arrives this evening. They've got a full day of where is he going tomorrow, Eamonn?
He's going to he's having a meeting with Sunak tonight. Then there's the University of Ulster tomorrow before he heads. I mean, Northern Ireland just seems to be a box to tick while he's there, because he's spending most of the time in Southern Ireland.
Yes, and why do you think that is?
Because he's thinking of the American election, where he gets most of his vote from, the Irish vote.
I get the impression, I mean, he's quite a devout Catholic, isn't he? I get the impression he's quite fond of his Irish heritage and keen to explore that. I don't know if he's even
Yes, but he'll be 86 if he wins the next election. Seriously.
He's 80 now.
He'll be 86 when he's in office next time round.
Yeah. So he's off to the Republic of Ireland for longer.
Yeah, so he's only having a whirlwind visit he's popping over to Belfast, then moving straight on to the Republic of Ireland, where he'll spend a good few days. So it seems that it looks more like a kind of a signalling visit when he pops to Northern Ireland. But when he lands, Rishi will greet him. So there'll definitely be some kind of song and dance about the new special relationship and kind of their building bridges between the UK and the US.
Okay.
Good. Millie, appreciate it. Millie Cook's a political editor at the Daily Express. Thank you very much indeed. 18 minutes past 7. I'm going to bring you up to date with what else is happening news-wise.
Yes, Keir Starmer is planning to launch more adverts attacking the Prime Minister, with the next one blaming him for crashing the economy. The Labour leader says Rishi Sunak's fingerprints are all over struggling household budgets. It follows the party's original ad, which accused the Prime Minister of not wanting child sex abusers to go to prison.
In America, a man who shot 5 colleagues dead in a bank has been identified as 23-year-old Connor Sturgeon. 9 other people, including a police officer, were wounded in the attack in Louisville, Kentucky. The gunman was shot dead at the scene.
1 million smokers will be encouraged to swap cigarettes for vapes in a new government scheme. Under Swap to Stop, set to be announced today, vape starter kits will be offered to almost 1 in 5 smokers in England to push for a smoke-free nation. Officials say it's the first scheme of its kind to be rolled out nationwide. Smoking story. I'm sure, I think I saw it in the Times this morning, that there's a real drive to try and stop pregnant women from smoking. And I wasn't sure if they were trying to get pregnant women to take up vaping instead, but they were certainly offering them, I think it was up to £400
The thing is
if
this
pregnant women gave up
vaping,
smoking.
Is this vaping good for you, better for you? What is the situation with it? One minute it is the answer to smoking, the next minute it's going to kill you as well.
I can't remember where I saw it, which paper. But anyway, it's interesting that pregnant women, it's still a problem that pregnant women are smoking, and, you know, trying to work out the best way to get them off it, whether that's to suggest vaping or offering them cash.
Well, yeah. A pregnant woman smoking, are you addicted or are you just stupid? Let us know. You hate when I say people are stupid, but there are stupid people.
I don't deny that. I just feel rude saying it. I couldn't agree more.
Stupid. S-T-U-P-I-D. Stupid. 20 past 7. Coming up, we'll discuss if we're paying too much for streaming services. You know, Amazon, there it is, iPlayer.
What were you watching on last night?
No, you don't pay for iPlayer.
What's the other one?
Disney Plus. Everything's a plus. Paramount Plus, they're all there anyway.
Discovery.
I tell you what, I haven't watched those 2 Egypts.
I did.
Gosh, did you watch?
Yeah,
did you watch them?
I watched the first 3 and then I gave up.
Couldn't be, but I would only just get my blood pressure up.
Yeah, but do you know, I said it actually at the time that we watched it. If you cut out all the whinging and moaning, I just enjoyed having a nosy at their life, and I got a few glimpses of their children. And to be honest, if they'd have played that card, leaving the royal family, they could have had a big success. And people
lifestyle
like me
of the rich
would have
and
been
famous.
interested. Yeah, but also, you know, a little insight to the royals, what really goes on. But then they started whinging, and I couldn't watch it.
Okay, well, we're going to do more whinging after this.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end. I can't Britain's wink. Listening.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hello there, nice to have you on board. Still to come on today's programme at the time at 25 minutes past 7.
At 7:45, we're discussing World Parkinson's Day as celebrities like Jeremy Paxman and Michael J. Fox push for better awareness of the disorder.
20 past 8, all the drama from the biggest non-league match in history, Ryan Reynolds Wrexham, a triumph over Notts County.
Oh, now I started watching that on one of those channels.
Yeah.
Can't watch it the end of it now because I think it was on Discovery. We just cancelled Discovery. But I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, a lot of people say whether you like football or not.
I'm not a football fan, but I am a Ryan Reynolds fan. And I am now a Wrexham fan, I've decided. Quite like the story.
I love this story about the linesman, Konstantin Hadzidikas, has been stood down because he was the ref for that Liverpool Arsenal game, and he elbowed a player.
The ref elbowed a player?
Yeah, the player came up and touched him in the back. Touched him in the back, and the linesman just went, pff, give him one right in the chin. Brilliant. They should be given a medal for that, I think. Absolutely brilliant. These privileged, pampered players, you know, excellent stuff. And I mean, officials just constantly abused, abused. So I think, lay your hands on me, pay the penalty. That was the message to him. Right. Roll the sting. New stats out today. I never believe stats. They can always be manipulated. That many of you are cutting back on groceries and eating out, but you're spending more money sitting in on your TV subscriptions.
Yes, digital content and subscription spend was up 4% last month, partly driven by the latest season premieres of popular shows such as Succession, Ted Lasso and The Mandalorian.
Well, I tell you what they were driven by, I bet you. And let's see if the consumer rights expert Martin James agrees with me. Martin, if you phone up any of these subscription channels and you say, I'm going to cancel, apparently they do you a deal. I'm reliably informed. They can say, oh, well, now, Mr. Holmes, just think about that. Just think about that before you do. So they may actually get, if you see what I'm getting at, more subscriptions, but at less value, if you're with me.
Well, absolutely. Hello, Eamonn and Isabel. What you're saying is absolutely right, if you can phone them up, because actually a lot of these subscription services you can only cancel by going onto your laptop. It's one of those really curious things where you can sign up on your phone or on your tablet, but if you want to cancel, say, Amazon Prime, you have to click through about 20 different options by going through your laptop. So getting in is very easy. Getting out is a lot more complicated.
As my colleague will verify, because it's happened to her with the newspaper subscription.
It's not just TV show subscriptions, but, apps. I've got newspaper apps on my phone, and I realise how much money I'm spending on all the newspapers. And whilst it's great, I actually get to see all the newspapers at work every day, so probably don't need to be continually shelling out. And it's a lot of money, newspapers.
It's a lot of money.
I spent about 20 minutes trying to extricate myself from one of them, and I literally couldn't work it out. A degree and a postgrad. Still can't work out how to cancel a subscription.
It has to be your desktop computer then.
Well, apparently you have to ring some of them, so, it's
and
one
they never
rule
answer.
for one, and,
So there's so many, there's a proliferation of new channels, though, Martin, and they all have the word plus on them. So basically you get the bog standard treatment, and then you get the plus channel, which you really do have to pay for. Do you think there are too many channels out there, or what way do you think this is all heading?
Well, I think we're going to hit a critical mass at some point, because it's very, very frustrating. I mean, just to give you an example, I've become obsessed with programme Yellow Jackets that's been available on Sky Atlantic, and that's now gone on to Paramount Plus. So if I want to watch season 2, there's no way around it. I have to pay for that additional channel. And actually, this is where we all get lured in, because lots of us think that we can beat the system. We think that we can subscribe for a month, binge watch everything, and then cancel. Whereas actually what happens in reality is most of us sign up and then find ourselves continuing to pay for things. So these stats that are out today are actually very illusionary. It gives the impression that we're all overspending, when actually what's happening is we're being lured in and then forgetting to cancel. I kind of call it death by 1,000, because you think, well, £6 here, maybe I'm not going to notice that. But actually, if you sit down and add it up, it's a large amount of money. And that's before you even get to the fact that you can pay for additional channels within streaming services. So once again, if you do a 7-day trial, you might actually find that you're paying 15, 20 quid a month without even realising it, because you've signed up just to watch one film.
Martin, one of the things to say we're doing is cutting back on spending food, but not necessarily delivery apps. Now, please tell me, my friend, because I earn a good wage, and when I do a delivery order, I absolutely think, is this real? Is this serious? This is more than you would pay if you went out to
the Ritz
a restaurant. Honestly, it is. And therefore, I'm asking you, is there some sort of, what is the economics? Because it used to be that local takeaways existed with their own delivery driver. Now they have one of these app people as well. Is there a cost to that? Is the price ramped up? Are we paying more through an app for Just Eat, WhatsApp, whatever it happens to be?
Yes, we're paying more for everything by default, and that's the thing. Over time, all kinds of companies, from supermarkets to delivery companies, they've ramped up the costs incrementally. But now that money's got really tight, we're suddenly noticing. I mean, my jaw has dropped on a trip around the supermarket recently, when some of the things that we've been talking about over the past year have suddenly come home to roost, and I've realised quite how expensive a lot of these basic costs are. But then, when you look at local restaurants that we should be supporting, my local Chippy is really struggling because the cost of cooking oil is so expensive that it's actually having a real impact. So we're seeing a lot of these costs being applied on. The big issue, though, is whether these big companies that largely operate unscrutinised, and if you want to get really political, often dodge quite a bit of tax in this country, are the ones that are actually increasing these costs quite a lot. So it's the delivery companies themselves that are charging too much, not the underlying suppliers.
Well, so the answer is we sit at home, we watch the free channels like GB News, and we don't eat. We
do eat, but we maybe grow our own.
Grow your own. Do something
there we
like
go.
that.
The good life.
Martin, thanks for your take on things. Really appreciate it. Martin James is a consumer rights expert. It's very difficult to work out how to entertain oneself now in the evening.
Yeah. Reading a book. That's my favourite pastime.
But I have to eat. If I was reading a book, I'd have to eat as well.
Yeah.
Eating's a great entertainment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cooking, that can keep you busy for hours.
But I get all those subscription channels. Who needs them?
Yeah.
I just go, who needs them?
Too many.
I mean, I love Star Trek, and I got one Paramount Plus because Strange New Worlds, this new offshoot of Star Trek, was there. And then I just went, it's not the original, it's not what I want to watch anyway, and it costs, so forget it. Get rid of that too. 32 minutes past 7 o'clock.
Stay with us. Coming up, we'll be discussing how civil servants' mental health sick days have risen by a shocking 38% as we go through the papers with Norman Baker and Emily Carver in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
25 to 8 is the time, or just after, if I was being strictly honest with you. Let's bring you up to date with the front pages of the papers. Here's how they stack up on this Tuesday.
The Times focusing on patients who are likely to face a month of disruption as junior doctors begin their 4-day strike this morning.
Express says don't get ill, as they warn the walkout will have a catastrophic impact on the NHS.
The Telegraph is focusing on Joe Biden's journey to Northern Ireland today as he prepares to meet leaders from all 5 of the country's main political parties.
And the Mail, the ongoing migrant crisis. They say 19 terror suspects amongst Channel arrivals.
And The Sun says the Queen wanted William and Harry to join the war in Afghanistan as a new documentary reveals the late monarch's wish to have her grandsons fight for their country.
Let's go through the newspapers now. We do that in the company of Norman Baker and Emily Carver. Very nice to see you both. And Norman, we're starting with the Eye, page 5. UK citizenship test focuses on mundane trivia.
It does indeed. This is criticism of the Life in the UK test, which you have to take if you want to apply for citizenship of this country. And the suggestion here, which I have to say I agree with, is that some of the questions are really...
Come on, give us
irrelevant.
one. Give us one.
I want to know whether you can answer this question. OK. Catherine Howard was the 6th wife of Henry VIII. True or false?
No idea. Let's say true.
It's false.
Oh.
Secondly, what are the 2 buildings designed by the 17th century architect Inigo Jones? Durham Cathedral, Queen's House at Greenwich, Banqueting House in Whitehall, or the Tower of London?
Why would I even want to know that?
17th century. But this is a test that you have to apply. You have to answer these questions correctly in order to get citizenship.
And Greenwich. What's the answer?
Well, the answer is Queen's... I don't know the answers. I'm looking at the answers here. Queen's House at Greenwich and Banqueting House at Whitehall.
High five, Emily!
I can remain. We can remain.
You're a Remainer. That's good. And it's also, in what country of the British Empire did the Boer War take place?
Easy.
Yes,
South
that's easier.
Africa.
That's an easier one. But, I mean, apparently David Cameron was asked some of these questions on a US show and failed to answer them correctly. I really do think we ought to get more up-to-date questions, do we not?
More relevancy. What should they be then?
More relevancy.
Like what?
Well, questions about life today, about how you claim, how you manage to, how the old age pension system works, or stuff like that.
Things you should be taught in school.
Or about devolution in the UK, or something which is relevant to today.
Like who is the Prime Minister?
And who's the Prime Minister,
History's
Even my children know that.
Well, it's good that you have to do a little bit of, studying, no?
Studying?
Yeah, but that's not... I mean, I think we're all agreed those are pretty obscure questions and don't affect anybody's life as well.
Not.
Emily, Downing Street believes an autumn vote would provide Sunak's best chance of victory. So they're going to go early?
Yes, the Daily Telegraph is revealing... Well, it's quite late, actually, but they have up to January 2025
yes.
To call an election. They're going to go in the autumn, apparently, so October, November.
As in they're going to call it in the autumn.
They're going to hold the election.
How long's the period between calling it and holding it?
Surprisingly, it's only about 3.5 weeks minimum.
What? Oh, gosh.
And that's next...
Wouldn't it be nice if it was just 3.5 weeks of election?
That's not this autumn, that's next autumn.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, they think this will give them the most... Well, allow them enough time to close the gap on Labour, who are currently 18%.
I think it's
points ahead.
Just from a journalist's point of view, I'm already thinking, well, that will clash with the American elections in November.
Well, that's true,
Can you imagine
actually?
political reporting if we've got a British election in October or November here and then straight over... I mean, that would just be a nightmare.
Well, it'll be a good compare and contrast in terms of the campaign tactics. The American campaigghing is just, very entertaining.
Well, it just drags on, doesn't it, with the primaries and all the nominations.
So much money is in it compared to here. Although Rishi Sunak has a lot of money himself, so maybe he'll put some in.
Maybe you will. I think this is spin, actually, to be honest with you, that we don't know if this is going to be true or not, but what it strikes me is it's a sign of desperation. It's like John Major's government in the 1990s. They go on as long as you possibly can and hope something turns up.
Well, I mean, they're not going to do anything else. It would be illogical, surely. If you've actually got a bunch of policies that you believe in and you're trying to steady the ship, as you described earlier, which Rishi Sunak was doing, why on earth would you say, let's call time now? Why not see it through and then let people decide based on how you performed? I think that's perfectly logical.
You could argue from a narrow perspective, a Conservative perspective, that you have another winter of problems in the NHS coming through, and therefore you want to go to the country this September before that happens?
Maybe.
Well, no, because they want to show the economy improving and the small boats ceasing to cross the channel. That's
No chance of that.
According to the Telegraph, anyway, but that would make sense. He needs to fulfil his 5 pledges before he goes to the ballot, or goes to the country.
Right, Norman, let's go to The Guardian.
Yes.
Heavy-handedness of police in Essex this time. What's the story?
Yes, well, we've got it on the screen. The headline, police deny bereavement claim of rebuke over pub seizure of what they call gollywog dolls. And this is the suggestion that the police in Essex have gone in and seized a number of historical dolls as being inappropriate for today's life, as a result of some complaint. And the Home Secretary is quoted as, or her department says that she has said to the police that they should be dealing with something more serious rather than quote this kind of nonsense. And the views have been made very plain to Essex Police. Essex Police, however, say that they've had no such contact with the Home Secretary or her office, so it's not quite clear whether they have complaints or not.
Interesting.
Strange.
Obviously, it suits her to talk a tough game on this, but they're saying this is the direction that we have on this, and no one has told us otherwise.
Very bizarre.
Yes.
6 police officers raided this pub. However tasteless these items might be.
But do you think, Emily, that the Home Secretary should be involved in this or not?
No, I think sometimes, you know, secretaries of state should leave the police to it, although this probably was an excessive use of police force or police officers' time. So perhaps there is some justification.
Well, I agree with that view, actually, but I also think that there's a wider debate here as to what has happened historically. This may apply to statues as well. What was OK years and years ago, decades ago, should that now be removed from society, or should it just be presented in an historical context? As I understand it from the papers, these dolls were not presented in a kind of threatening way, but just as a kind of part of an historical collection.
Emily, let's talk about smoking. Earlier, I was trying to recall where I'd seen a story about pregnant women being offered up to £400 in shopping vouchers to stop them smoking. I saw it in the Times online, but you've got this in the Sun. Free vaping kits if you quit fags.
Yes, it's also here, the £400 in gift vouchers for pregnant women. I mean, I do think if getting pregnant isn't enough to make you stop smoking, I'm not sure £400 will. It doesn't seem to... I don't know if there are strings attached, whether you have to spend the £400 on vaping equipment. But anyway, I think this is a difficult one, whether you think the NHS or the local councils should be giving freebies away to stop people from doing you know, unhealthy things. Apparently it works, according to a study here. I'm not sure, but I think in general it's much better for people's health to be vaping rather than smoking, even if vaping isn't completely harmless. But of course, we've seen recently how the government may be looking to crack down on children vaping.
It's interesting they're not suggesting pregnant women vape, isn't it? They're saying shopping vouchers for them. Or are they saying pregnant women should vape?
It's a little bit confusing, this article, actually. It doesn't,
because I'd be very
spell it
surprised
out.
if they were advising pregnant women to vape, because nobody really knows what the implications would be for the baby. Anyway.
Well, it's better than smoking.
Personally, I wouldn't do either.
Smoking awful cigarettes.
Yeah.
Interesting story in the Express, Norman. And this is across the channel. I'm not sure from what port to what port.
Yes.
But not a mechanical ship, not a ship with an engine, but a tall ship, a sailing ship.
It's from Ramsgate to Ostend, or near Ostend. And this is another story about boats crossing the channel, but a rather different one to one we normally cover on the channel here.
Sail power.
Sail power, which is the idea that there's someone starting from May the 1st, actually, this regular cross-channel sailings of tall ships powered only by wind, which can take between 10 and 30 hours to get from Ramsgate across to Belgium, and it only costs you £700 for the trip. Sounds like a bargain.
I'd like to see the site. I think it'd be an incredible spectacle.
Yes.
And I certainly used to love in Bristol when the tall ships used to come up the Avon Gorge and you could see them and it was stunning. But I don't fancy a long... I mean, it's bad enough going on a ferry. If you've ever taken the ferry to Ostend, which you
yes, I have.
to do, it's, I mean, often quite choppy.
Yeah. No, I think it's an interesting idea. And apparently you can also take an active role by hoisting the sails, navigating, and take the helm for a while.
Oh, yeah, I fancy that. Get me to Ostend, but I'm going to have to work for my passage. privilege.
And pay £700.
I've seen it on Below Deck. It's not that easy.
I think it's... But if you've been on a sailing ship, which I have around Iceland, actually, looking at whales, I mean, it's gorgeous being on a ship with absolute silence apart from the sound of the waves.
Yes. How long would it normally take to get...
Get to Ostend? Well, on a ferry?
Yeah.
Which depends where you go from, but a long time, possibly overnight if you...
Yeah, so
10 to 30 hours here.
Yeah, and you don't put your car on board this one, no?
I don't think so, no. Not even your bicycle.
Well, in theory, it's good, and I mean, there'd be a lot of people that may support it, but it's a very niche audience, I suppose.
That's right. It's maximum 24 people.
Let us know. Would you fancy that, Emily?
I get seasick.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah.
Also, I certainly can't sail. I've tried it a couple of times. I'm terrible.
Emily,
cold either.
If you worked in the civil service, Emily, you get all sorts of sickness. You get there's nothing that you're immune from, it appears. And I used to work in the civil service when I was a student, and it amazed me how they use their sick leave.
Well, it's a hugely broad term, civil servant, though, is it not?
Well, they're still civil servant.
Well,
the
these
point
are the
is they get the
government
benefits. They get the benefits. They know how much sick leave they've got, and they take every day of it. A lot of them do.
I'm interested that you've taken that view.
Yeah.
Quite a tough view. Yes, because these civil servants, apparently the number of sick days they're taking for mental health in particular has risen 38% in just 1 year. 771,433 days of sick leave taken last year. Shocking rise, apparently. Now,
is
to take this in face value...
or is it acknowledgement that the mental health is a health problem as well as
Well,
physical
maybe.
health? It's a question.
But you could be cynical because also, I don't know if you remember, but a week or 2 weeks ago, we were talking about how the rate of long COVID within the civil service was double that of the general population. So perhaps it's a bit easy to take some time off in the civil service. I'm not sure if they have a uniquely stressful job.
Well, I mean, all I can say is that when I was a minister, we didn't have people taking lots of time off. They were working jolly hard for me, I'm pleased to say.
Good.
Yeah, but
You would say that.
but what they're saying is here, there's a culture, there is the availability of this sick leave, there are lots of perks available, and they're using it now. Either the job being a civil servant, which Isabel says is a wide church. It could be anything from a police officer to a clerk to a security guard,
top civil servant,
whatever. But apparently they are all more stressed than anybody else in the whole world.
It's a bit strange, isn't it?
Oh, you cynics. Let us know your views at home. We say goodbye to Emily and Norman for now. More from them just after 8:30. Thank you both.
Thank you.
OK, it is 11 minutes now before 8 o'clock. Let's bring you up to date with what's happening news-wise. And thousands of junior doctors have begun a 4-day strike on what's been described as the most disruptive industrial action in NHS history. Members of the British Medical Association are asking for a 35% pay rise to resolve the recruitment and retention crisis. Around 350,000 appointments are going to be cancelled as a result of this walkout.
The US President is to visit Northern Ireland this evening to mark the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. Joe Biden's expected to meet with Stormont's main political parties in Belfast.
Heavy rain with gales of up to 60 miles an hour is forecast to hit parts of Britain over the next 2 days. A yellow warning for wind is in place from 3 p.m. for the west coast of Northern Ireland. Another warning for southwest England and South Wales then comes into force on Wednesday.
Now, World Parkinson's Day is being celebrated on the 11th of April, that is today, and it's celebrated every year to raise awareness for the condition that affects almost 150,000 people here in the UK.
What is Parkinson's? It's a debilitating disorder. It's caused by the gradual degeneration of nerve cells in the brain, which affects motor control, in other words, hand movements, head movements, anything that moves within you. Let's go to the Director of Research at Parkinson's UK, David Dexter. David, I'm sure it's much more complex than how I've described it, but who's at risk of getting Parkinson's? Good morning to you.
Good morning. Yes. Yeah, we don't know who is going to develop Parkinson's yet. There are certain forms of it which are linked through a genetic link in the family, but we don't know who is going to be at risk at the moment. So we need to do more research to identify those people.
What many people would be surprised to learn is that it's on the increase, more and more cases of it, and no sign of a cure.
Yes, it's the fastest growing neurological condition. So currently, as you say, about 445,000 people. But the thing is, the drugs currently treating it were developed over 60 years ago, and we still haven't got a cure. So that's why we celebrate World Parkinson's Day, to really highlight the tenacity and resilience of the people affected by Parkinson's, because we do need more funding to find a cure for Parkinson's.
We see a lady in some video that we're running there, and these uncontrollable shakes that she has. Just tell us how it manifests itself in people.
Yeah, what you can see there is the tremor, and that's one of the most visible forms, that you will actually see of the clinical condition. But there are over 40 other different symptoms of the condition. So some people start with anxiety, some people have problems with their memory, often that they have problems with their sleep. So it's not just a movement disorder, it affects people's whole lives, really.
When I was a student, I nursed a gentleman who had Parkinson's, went into his home every day, and he was perfectly capable to stay at home, but he would have these episodes when the shakes would be worse than other times. Other times we could be having a perfectly lovely conversation or, pottering around the house, but then the shakes would kick in and it would be a case of trying to take the medicine at that point to try and control it. Is that still the way it's treated?
Yes, that's right, yes. And unfortunately, as you progress through the condition, you need to take more and more medication. And also they start wearing off. And that's why you saw the gentleman that you were caring for, the tremor returning, because they need to take the medication much more regularly. And then eventually you start getting more side effects from the medication as well. So that's why we need to fund more research. Parkinson's UK does fund quite a lot of medical research into Parkinson's, and we're getting there. We're finding out what are the causes of Parkinson's so that we can actually now start to develop new drugs to actually slow Parkinson's for the first time.
Just finally, David, today is all about profile. It's about awareness. It's about getting the message out there. And it must help that cause when well-known people succumb to Parkinson's. I'm thinking of, in this country, Jeremy Paxman, the journalist, and...
Billy Connolly.
Billy Connolly, yeah. And Michael J. Fox in the USA.
Ozzy Osbourne.
Yeah, so all of these people highlight, the condition. So these people are absolutely fantastic. Role models for the condition, really. So, but it's really, it's the people affected by Parkinson's living with it every day. So we've got over 50 buildings and monuments lit up on World Parkinson's Day. So if you go out on the streets, like Battersea Power Station, many buildings are lit up blue to celebrate World Parkinson's Day. And there is events going across the whole world, including in the UK as well.
David Dexter, appreciate it. Thank you on this World Parkinson's Day. David is Director of Research at Parkinson's UK. We'll be back after the weather.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Turning wet and windy over the next 24 hours or so. Met Office wind warnings already in force for today and through into Wednesday. This area of low pressure is going to bring that heavy rain, strong winds. We could see gusts of 50, 60 miles an hour possible in places, leading to some disruption, and then it slowly only eases out of the way into Thursday. But it's a cold but bright start this morning, plenty of sunny spells. We do have some showers across parts of Scotland in particular, but as we move through the day, we'll see the thicker cloud and rain moving in from the southwest in association with that area of low pressure, and the winds picking up too, particularly as we move into the afternoon. We'll see gusts of 50, 60 miles an hour, and this combined with some heavy rain will lead to some tricky driving conditions. Best of the sunshine holding on further north and east, but temperatures a little disappointing. Into the evening time, this band of rain pushes northeastwards quite quickly, heavy at times, leading some difficult travelling conditions during the rush hour. Bumping up against colder air across Scotland, we could see some snow over the mountains. And then overnight, we'll see the winds ease for a time, but still some showers moving in between clear spells. And this will allow temperatures to dip away 3 or 4 Celsius in the towns and cities. So a chilly start to Wednesday. But it won't be long before the winds start picking up again from the southwest, parts of Wales, southwest England, along some English Channel coast. 50, 60 miles an hour plus as possible, combined with some heavy rain, which also may fall as snow over the Welsh mountains. Elsewhere, we will see sunny spells, scattered showers, the winds a little lighter further north, and temperatures really struggling below average for the time of year, 11 or 12 at the very best. They're feeling quite cool into the afternoon. Further showers on Thursday and Friday, some of these heavy and thundery at times, but hopefully something a little drier as we head into the weekend, and temperatures just starting to rise a little bit as well.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the people's channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hundreds of thousands of operations will be cancelled as the most disruptive strike in the NHS's history kicks off.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Tuesday, the 11th of April. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Leading the news this morning, health leaders have urged the public to avoid risky behaviour as junior doctors begin walkouts. Patients could face a full month of disruption as the NHS struggles to cope with one of the worst strikes in its history.
The US President has said he'll meet with leaders from all 5 of Northern Ireland's main political parties as he prepares to visit the UK this evening. It's part of his push to restore power sharing in Stormont.
The trip follows violence in Derry yesterday with petrol bombs hurled at police during a Republican parade.
And the former head of the British Armies claimed that the Queen wanted both William and Harry to fight the Taliban in Afghanistan, but decided it was too risky to send the future heir to the throne.
Your views very welcome. We love to hear from you. We love to hear from you on Twitter. We love to hear from you on email. gbviews@gbnews.uk, and let us know where you're watching or listening from.
So it's our top story this morning. Hundreds of thousands of operations will be cancelled as junior doctors across England have begun a 4-day strike.
NHS leaders are warning it could be the most disruptive industrial action in their health services history, with services affected well into May.
Well, the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says the strike risks patient safety and that the demand for a 35% pay rise is unaffordable.
Let's hear now from junior doctor Frankie Jackson-Spence, who told us the NHS has become an undesirable place to work.
Yeah, and can I just point out that it's not actually all about pay. Because of the poor pay, the NHS for junior doctors has become quite an undesirable place to work. You graduate after 5 or 6 years with £100,000 worth of student debt. You're then faced with thousands of pounds of mandatory exam fees, fees to exist on the medical register, insurance, indemnity, all of which are necessary to progress. And unfortunately, because of the poor pay and all of these costs, many doctors are actually leaving the NHS to move overseas where there's a better standard of living and it's a more desirable place to work. So that leaves lots of rota gaps and staffing issues. So these junior doctors are working these shifts for £14 an hour and actually doing the job of multiple doctors.
Andrew saying, I fully support our junior doctors in the NHS. The government is running it down over the past 13 years. For the rest of the week, I will not be drinking at the pub and following guidance to stay at home and drink. I mean, it is ridiculous, don't get involved in anything risky. So what if you're a scaffolder?
Well, exactly.
Or,
you can't take your children to the playground.
I'm not going working.
Don't get in your car.
Yeah, I mean, it's patronising, sort of, as if anybody sets out to get injured, throughout the course of the week.
Stuart says the NHS is not fit for purpose. Time to start over again, out of touch. And I do notice an increasing number of people saying that. If you said that 5 years ago, you'd have been met with outrage. But I do think increasingly people are thinking it's just not working anymore.
Let's hear from Linda.
OK.
Linda, lovely to see you back, Eamonn and Isabel. Thank you very much indeed. Had a nice Easter break. I like Easter as a time of year.
Yeah, lots of lambs in the field and on the plate.
On the subject of junior doctors, yes, they probably need a pay rise. Definitely not 35%. But they need 35%, they need 35%. That means the 35% behind everybody else. But when your guest, who is a junior doctor, who you've just seen, announces they have thousands of pounds of student debt, that is not our problem. How they manage their money when they were training shouldn't be for the taxpayer to pick up the tab. But Linda, should we not be training the workforce? Should we not be supplying doctors for the NHS, letting them sign an agreement, an indenture that has them part of the NHS for 7 or 10 years?
Definitely, because
and then that's that paid off.
Australia. But we cap the number of medical students. We only train 7,500 a year and no more, which at the moment possibly is a good thing because otherwise they're all disappearing off. Yeah. But we import from India and all over more doctors than we train here in the UK every year, which seems silly. Well, let's go to our northwest of England reporter, Sophie Reaper. She's at Manchester Royal Infirmary. And let's go there, Sophie. And so are there, see a picket line behind you there as well.
Yes, good morning to you both. I'm here at Manchester Royal Infirmary. Now, one of the biggest concerns about this strike action is that we're coming off the back of the Easter bank holiday, which of course ran from Friday to Monday. We're now entering 4 days of strike action. So the big concern is that by the time this strike action concludes, the NHS won't have been operating at full strength for well over a week. Now, over the coming days, it's been suggested that around 350,000 appointments and operations could be cancelled, with Professor Sir Stephen Powis, the NHS National Medical Director, saying this next round of strikes will see unparalleled levels of disruption, and we are very concerned about the potential severity of impact on patients and services across the country. Now, of course, it's not just about the immediate impact, although there will of course be on the day delays today, but it's also about the long-term impact, because as we know, the NHS is already facing a huge waiting list as a result of the pandemic, so it's going to have a knock-on effect across the entirety of the NHS. Now, the British Medical Association has asked the government to work with them to negotiate on what they describe as the pay erosion that NHS junior doctors are facing. On the other hand, the Health Secretary Steve Barclay has said he's extremely disappointed that the BMA has maintained what he called an unrealistic position, although he has said he's determined to reach an agreement that benefits both sides.
Okay. Thank you, Sophie. Appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. From Manchester, we go to Northern Ireland now, and police there have condemned the violence against officers as senseless and reckless. This was after petrol bombs were thrown during a Republican parade in Londonderry yesterday.
Well, this all comes ahead of US President Joe Biden's arrival in Belfast later today, where he'll be meeting with the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak.
OK, let's now go live to our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie, who's there just reflecting the atmosphere. When do we expect to see the President?
Well, we'll really not see him probably till tomorrow morning. At some stage, he is arriving quite late in the evening before he then has talks with the parties here, all 5 parties, to try and get Stormont back up and running, because, of course, it's not running ever since the Brexit protocol and then the Windsor Framework document. Unionists not happy with that particular document at all. So really, Stormont has stalled, so he's not going there. That's quite embarrassing for the British government that 25 years after the Good Friday Agreement that should happen, but that's not uncommon. On the 20th anniversary, Sinn Féin had pulled out of the Good Friday Agreement, out of Stormont, and there was no institutions then either. So it seems to be every time we get to a landmark of this agreement, which I explained earlier on has been pretty clunky since 2005, the institutions seem to be down. But Northern Ireland has enjoyed 25 years of peace and prosperity, it must be said. And we were saying earlier on that this road behind me used to have to be searched to go into it. But as I was waiting on this hit coming up from the 7 o'clock one, I noticed that a police officer, now Isabel, you mightn't think this strange, but a police officer walked the whole way down from one side of the City Hall right past me and up past the other side on her own. That is 25 years of peace, because as Eamonn will tell you, 25 years ago the RUC would have been here, the Royal Ulster Constabulary. They would have probably been escorted by the British Army, where you would have had 2 or 3 officers on one side of the street and maybe 4 on the other, very heavily armed and fully clothed in bulletproof wear. This young constable walked straight past me in a high-vis jacket. That shows you how far we have came in 25 years, and it really shows you what is at stake in Northern Ireland, and it shows you that last night's few petrol bombs thrown at a police vehicle are very much in the lower regions of any violence that might appear here.
And people wouldn't believe, Dougie, behind you, the ring of steel that was around the city centre, the fact that there's a car pulled up behind you now, a phonocab or something, and basically you weren't allowed to park your car if it was unattended. No cars were allowed to be parked if there was no one in them on the premise that they could contain a bomb.
That's completely correct. That's how bad it was in Belfast 25 years ago. I've said it before, it was worse statistically to live, more dangerous in Belfast than it was in Beirut at that stage of the game.
Gosh.
That is some statistic.
Yeah. Well, look, between the two of you, you do paint a very evocative picture of where we've come and how far things have progressed. Thank you very much, Dougie. Of course, it is a historic visit from the President, and our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood, has been looking back on the collaborative effort to try and achieve that peace that's been enjoyed in Ireland.
Joe Biden is in Northern Ireland. But why does America see herself as the guardian of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement? And what does this visit say about UK-US relations? The United States claims a strong historic connection with Ireland due to her large Irish-American population. Migration from the island of Ireland played a formative part of the American story in the 19th century, and today over 10% of Americans claim Irish heritage, including the current president. Perhaps because of this, during the 3 decades of the Troubles, transatlantic relations became strained on numerous occasions, not least on St. Patrick's Day in 1976, when US presidential candidate Jimmy Carter wore a badge that read "England out of Ireland." Yet by 1987, the House of Representatives in the States voted through an aid package of $250 million to Northern Ireland. And by the 1990s, the US and UK were working far more closely on matters of security. From the Gulf War to Kosovo, British and American security interests were more aligned. And the Blair-Clinton friendship, as well as ideological kinship, formed a basis for cooperation. Clinton saw himself as an unaligned peacemaker, although many in Ulster were suspicious given his decision to grant a US visa to Gerry Adams. In 1995, Bill Clinton became the first US president to visit Northern Ireland, with his visit a strong sign in the ongoing peace process, at that time being worked on by John Major's government. Clinton in his visit urged dialogue, calling on nationalists and unionists to engage in constructive conversations. His visit paved the way for the former US Senator George Mitchell to become the chairman of the peace talks that eventually led to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. And on the 10th of April 1998, the agreement was signed. The summation of decades of diplomatic work between the British, American and Irish governments, beginning an era of peace and camaraderie both Sunak and Biden will seek to maintain during this week's visit. Tom Harwood, GB News.
Well, with the time at 8:13, let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
Keir Starmer's planning to launch more adverts attacking the Prime Minister. The next one blaming him for crashing the economy. The Labour leader says Rishi Sunak's fingerprints are all over struggling household budgets. It follows the party's original ad, which accused the Prime Minister of not wanting child sex abusers to go to prison.
In the US, a man who shot 5 colleagues dead has been identified as 23-year-old Connor Sturgeon. 9 other people, including a police officer, were wounded in the attack, which took place at a bank in Louisville, Kentucky. The gunman was shot dead at the scene.
More than 150 pubs across England and Wales have shut for good over the first 3 months of the year. It follows rising energy bills and food prices, as well as weakened consumer demand. The British Beer and Pub Association predicts the average energy bill for a pub could rise by over £18,000 a year from this month. Vaughan says civil servants like doctors, nurses and many other public service workers enjoy up to 6 months paid leave annually, plus generous pensions. No one in the private sector receives anything close to their benefits or often their salaries.
Kat says, I was a civil servant for almost 40 years and the 10-day sick leave entitlement has always been classed as annual leave for a lot of staff. Mental health wasn't talked of in the old days. When I retired, my total of sick over a 30-year period.
I was trying to stop you before you see what I've done there. Like,
yeah, because that didn't make sense.
Because it didn't make sense.
Well done for pre-reading it.
Civil servants are often given targets to reach, says Linda, and brought to task if they are not reached. Often these are phone contacts trying to get assistance and the employees are trying to give them the help they need whilst keeping one eye on the clock. Well, that's what everybody has to do, isn't it, really? It's called work. 15 minutes past 8.
Coming up, Paul Coit will be here. He'll have all the drama from yesterday's blockbuster non-league title game and the Hollywood stars that we're watching.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us four, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end.
I can't
Britain's
wink,
listening.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Just looking ahead, and at 8:45 on our little humble show today, we're going to be talking to the Labour Party about their plans to protect homeowners as they accuse the Conservatives of crashing the economy, and they've got all those adverts and things attacking Rishi Sunak. There's Angela Rayner with Keir Starmer, and anyway, that's coming at 8:45.
Then at 9 o'clock, we've got the former tabloid editor Eve Pollard giving us her take on what's being called the most disruptive NHS strike in history.
Yes, I like listening to Eve. She knows everything about everything. She's got good opinions. Get in touch with her, ask her a question. gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet at GB News. We've done the front pages, let's do the back pages now. They shape up like this. The Express analyses Man City's preparations ahead of the Champions League quarter-final against Bayern Munich. The Mail focuses on the return of Dean Smith to the Premier League. Former Villa, former Norwich City boss, he agreed to become Leicester City's caretaker manager. Is he what they need? And The Guardian leads with Ryan Reynolds. Wrexham closing in on a return to the Football League after what can only be described a dramatic 3-2 win over their rivals Notts County.
OK, well, let's get into all of this with the broadcaster, Paul Coit. Paul, you have my full attention when it comes to the Wrexham story. Yes, because I started watching the documentary. I know I'm a bit behind, but I'm on board. I now support Wrexham.
You were a Spurs fan last week?
No, I wasn't.
OK.
I do like
Harry Kane. Right.
But I just loved an underdog story, and I love the idea that they're getting into this city and injecting it with a bit of old-fashioned love and TLC.
Why did they want to take over Wrexham?
Because, well, I think in the preamble to the show they explained basically that it's the oldest stadium in the UK, so there's lots of history, and they have potential to get back up there because they've been higher than they are now. It was quite a romantic story.
Were these guys football fans?
No, but they were avid sports fans, and they liked the fact that the pyramid, the pyramid involves people being the sort of magic which you don't have in the States.
That's right, they don't have relegation and promotion.
The relegation concept.
That's true.
Quite novel.
Ryan Reynolds said that in an interview yesterday, and he was saying that this is what there's no jeopardy. That's the thing. There's no jeopardy when it comes to American sports. You either win and that's it, or maybe have a go next year. Rob McElhenney put the tweet out yesterday, said, I can't believe there was a time when I thought football was boring. So there you go. How do you feel about that?
I feel American football's boring. I feel American baseball's boring. I feel basketball's a pain in the backside where nothing happens until the last minute.
Yeah, backwards, forwards, backwards, forwards.
So I'll settle for our soccer, as they call it.
Yeah, soccer. I didn't realise soccer was so interesting. But, I'm beginning to wonder whether the whole thing's scripted. Maybe they've put the whole thing together and made it into some Hollywood thing, whereas, and also you get Ben Foster at the end. There's this phrase that they often use, which always drives me crazy, and you go, oh, if it was a Hollywood film, you wouldn't make this up, you wouldn't believe... Well, actually, you would. Yeah. And also, you couldn't script this. Actually, you could script this quite easily. So, right at the end, Ben Foster, former England goalkeeper, who moves to Wrexham. He has his own YouTube stuff, where he puts his GoPro in the back of the goal, which he was stopped using at Watford. So he's doing that as well. So this is a guy, and he's thinking, well, you know what? This is probably some good fellas to get in with. He's filming it there, and now he'll be on the next documentary, and he's hanging out with Hollywood stars.
We got to the last minute, or we're in extra time.
Yeah.
And it's 3-2 to Wrexham.
That's right.
And he saves the penalty.
He saves the penalty.
Yeah.
It sounds a bit like Escape to Victory with Sylvester Stallone. Yeah. I think that's probably what it was. But it is a great story. And it is... We talk about the pyramid, and you think Little Wrexham, but they're very lucky to have these boys get involved in them. I spoke to people from the supporters clubs in Wrexham, this is about 2 or 3 years ago, when there were rumours that they were going to get involved. And there were some that I was speaking to, and they go, oh, no, I don't like this.
No, it's all
don't like the sound of this. They do that in there, do they?
Yeah, they're quite suspicious of them coming in. And in fact, McElhenney and Reynolds didn't even know each other before they sat down.
Right.
Having got the...
Seriously?
Yeah, they're not even friends. They just knew of each other because McElhenney's more small screen, Ryan Reynolds is the big movie star.
Yeah.
And McElhenney was the one who got into it first, and he was like, I can't do this with humble silver screen cash. I need some proper Hollywood...
Dollars.
That's it. That's it. And that's it. See, it is possible where... I imagine that there's other clubs at that level. See, there's two ways of looking at it. We can think, they could look at that and think, well, it's not right because they've got so much money, there's so much invested into them, they're going to be a success, it's going to work. But also, more people are looking at National League and looking at non-league as well, so that surely can only help them as well. It is a great story, but it was a heck of a game. So Wrexham 3, Notts County 2, and never has there been so much attention on non-league football, especially now as well.
Honestly, I don't know what's going to happen to him, but the linesman, whose name is Konstantin Hatzidakis. So basically, he's the linesman for Liverpool Arsenal.
Yep.
And Andy Robertson, the Liverpool player, walks up behind him and touches him. Yep. Now, you're not allowed to touch an official in the rules, but brilliant. This guy lifts his elbow and boom.
Everybody's up in arms about
Robertson's gob. I think it was the funniest thing. I think actually the guy should be promoted, given a bonus, something.
Well, it wouldn't happen in rugby. None of that.
No, because there's more respect for officials. And he's a big boy, so he is, this official.
Constantine, yeah.
Yeah.
He is, he's a big lad.
What do you make of all that?
Well, I've been talking about this a lot. Firstly, I'm very, very much against the way that players are around officials. We've spoken about this before. And like you said just now there, Izzy, there is, in rugby, it wouldn't happen. Yeah. You've got great big rugby players knocking people left, right and centre, and then when the referee comes up to them, they say, yes, sir, and they call them sir, and they take their medicine and they don't argue, because that's the way it's always been.
Sportsmen's like to accept what the referee says. Yeah, so why is that not the case in football?
It should be, but nobody seems to be doing anything about it, and they should do something about it. Now, if there's any foul or anything looks like a possible red card, you'll probably get 10 players around the referee, all getting closer. So get out of the way. And if you argue anymore, then I'll either book you or send you off. And it does need to stop, because then we saw the situation recently with Alexander Mitrovic, who's been banned for 8 games. Andy Robertson is going up to the linesman there. This is just after as the half-time whistle was blown. And he's arguing about something. He's gone up to him and sort of pushed him. He's up very close. So Hatzidakis has just moved his arm. Now, you can say whether he actually elbowed him. I doubt a linesman would do such a thing. I think it's more get out of the way.
He did it very well. I mean, it was literally this. Give me your chin. Oh. Right, so it was boom. Oh. It was like that. And
I think it was more sort of... It was a bit more of that angle.
That's going to be in the headlines now, isn't it?
It was class. Knockout punch was great. Anyway.
But Andy Robertson's holding on to his chin, and I can't believe he's done this to me. Yeah. But unfortunately, Hatzidakis, I mean, he's now going to be investigated, which is not a surprise, and being stood down. I just hope he gets to do it again, to be able to go out and actually do his job, because they get so much provocation around them.
Just a few words about some other things. The Leicester situation, they've appointed Dean Smith, I think he was last at Norwich.
That's right.
Seasoned manager.
Leicester are in trouble, so they need a manager to come in. It's just another caretaker manager. It's like Frank Lampard is over at Chelsea, someone that's going to be in there for the rest of the season. But more than anything, he needs to keep Leicester up. So he's got John Terry with him, who worked at Aston Villa. It's interesting that a lot of the newspapers are going, John Terry's going to come in and try and save Leicester, whereas really Dean Smith is the man. It's John Terry's his defence coach. So he's going to be with him, and Craig Shakespeare, who's the assistant manager, who was at Leicester as well with Claudio Ranieri, so he knows the club well.
John Terry was with him at Villa, though, wasn't he?
That's right, yeah. So he was with him.
A lot of people thought Terry would have been going to Chelsea with Frank.
But I don't know whether Frank and John are as close as many people think they are.
Yeah, they played together.
They played together, but not worked together.
Just a quick word about Man City. They're favourites to win the Champions League. Eric Haaland, that hairdo, I was showing it to Isabel today. He's got 2 little girl braids down
I thought
the back
it was.
of his neck.
You said, look at that. And I thought, oh, they're lovely braids. I wish I could do that. And then I realised...
I bet you wouldn't say that to his face, though.
I wouldn't pull them. I wouldn't pull them.
You don't be pulling his braids.
Dele Alli, right, OK, we're talking about player behaviour. Tell us what he's done wrong.
Well, Dele Alli, we know that
he's playing in Turkey now, isn't he?
Well, he's now leaving Besiktas in Turkey. He's an Everton player. It looks like he's going to be released by Everton as well. There we are. There's the photograph. It's these balloons and the...
helium?
It's worse than helium.
Tonic wine, £205 tequila, nitrous oxide canisters, SNUS tins. What's that? And empty balloons.
Well, it's the nitrous oxide, which is legal, and that's what he's doing there with the balloon. He's either that, because it's actually his 27th birthday today, so either that or he's just blowing up balloons for his birthday. I don't know whether we're filling the balloon or emptying the balloon. It's difficult to see, but I think we've got a good guess. It's a really sad story. I mean, you can look at this 2 ways. Dele Alli was a fantastic footballer and a regular in the England team when he was playing at Spurs. Then it started just to taper off a little. Then he just wasn't playing. Then he was sent over to Everton and thought that Frank Lampard might be able to turn him around. Hasn't worked. Now been sent out to Besiktas in Turkey, back back to Everton, and this is it seems to be going in one direction, and it just he needs to restart his career somehow, and
Wrexham.
I don't think it's going to happen.
He needs to go to Wrexham.
Wrexham is the answer.
Yeah.
He'll get in the films, he'll be able to play.
Get back to basics.
And there's balloons aplenty around Wrexham. Okay. So who knows how it's going to go. It is a worry for Dele Alli, but sometimes players bring it on themselves. There's bad people often around players when there's lots of money involved as well, so it doesn't look very good.
Good man. OK, Paul, appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Right, stay with us. Coming up, we'll be discussing why so many pubs are being forced to close their doors. Such a shame. Going through the papers with Norman Baker and Emily Carver. Just a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, here we go. It is a Tuesday morning. You're tuned into Breakfast with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster, and the front pages look like this.
Here's the Times. It's talking about patients likely to face a month of disruption as junior doctors begin their 4-day strike this morning.
How's it affecting you? Let us know. The Express says don't get ill, as they warn that walkout will have a catastrophic impact on the NHS.
The Telegraph focuses on Joe Biden's journey to Northern Ireland today as he prepares to meet leaders from all 5 of the country's main political parties.
Do you think it does his credibility any good being seen with that big rabbit in all these pictures?
It's the Easter roll.
So the American president is the one on the right.
It's a very old tradition. I think since the 1800s.
Well, meanwhile, the lead there, 19 terror suspects among channel rivals, they're saying. And the Sun?
The Sun says the Queen wanted William and Harry to join the war in Afghanistan as a new documentary reveals the late monarch's wish to have her grandsons fight for their country.
Norman, you're not so sure, are you? We've got Norman Baker and Emily Carver here to talk through the newspapers. But this association with the royal family and children thereof having to or being attached to the armed forces.
Well, there's two things, I think. First of all, it should be voluntary for them whether they join or not. I'm not against them joining, but it should be their decision. And it's almost obligatory if you're the member of the royal family in the line to the throne that you serve time in the army. I don't think that should be required.
It was a Louis Mountbatten thing, wasn't it?
It was.
Prince Philip thing.
Exactly. But then if you are joining the army, or the armed forces generally, then you should be open to serve in a way that any other member of the armed forces does. So you can't join, I don't think, on the one hand and then not participate on the other.
What about if you get to wear all the uniform and have all the medals but haven't served at all?
Well, that's very much the royal family.
I mean, that sticks in the craw of a lot of...
Well, it does. I mean, there are limitations as to how many medals you can have if you're a member of the public, actually. But if you're Prince Charles and King Charles now, then you've got so many medals on them. You can weigh down one of the ships in which he served. I mean, I think he's got 35, 40 medals. Charles has, and the last thing he did was captain a minesweeper about 40 years ago.
Emily, we go to the Mirror. This is page 10. The heading is "A Load of Ballots." So, what's the reference?
Well, this is the debate around voter ID. The Mirror is suggesting that it could have an impact on turnout in the local elections. This is because not a lot of people have apparently... there's still a lot of people who haven't registered to get some kind of certificate that shows their ID. David Davis has come out against this. He's been against it for a long time. He doesn't believe that people should need a mandatory voter ID in order to vote.
So they're saying that not everybody has a driving licence or a gas bill or I suppose you have to have a photographic identity, haven't you?
Well, they're talking about there's a specific certificate that you can apply for, and that means you don't need to have those traditional identifications. But not enough people have registered for those. So there are concerns that, people won't come out and vote. So the Mirror are...
Do we not think that perhaps people won't turn out and vote because they are sick of the kind of adverts that the Labour Party have been wheeling out recently, which, is not just exclusively to the Labour Party, but the nastiness in politics
people love that.
They don't love it. People will not turn out because it's a plague in all your houses, actually. They don't like the political parties, any of them at a particular time. But on the voter ID thing, look, I mean, you may call me a cynic, but this has been brought in by the government to diminish the number of people voting against the Conservatives. That's what it's about.
Meaning you're less likely to have an ID if you are non-Conservative.
If you're younger, the younger generation tend not to vote Conservative, the older generation do. So, for example, you can take along a bus pass if you're an old person, and that's ID. You can't take along student ID, that's not allowed.
On the other hand...
It's not allowed.
No, it's not. That's not accepted as voter ID.
On the other hand, should you be voting if you can't even be bothered to apply for a voter authority certificate by April the 1st?
Lots of people are busy.
It's not.
Lots of people are working hard, doing
most people
several
have some
jobs.
kind of identification.
Yes, but it's just another hoop to jump through. You should just be able to turn up at the ballot box.
Absolutely.
I think it's remarkable that you don't have to show your ID. I turn up at the ballot box and I could be anyone.
But
I might not be Emily Carver.
But this is the thing, isn't it? That there is obviously fraud going on as well.
Yes.
There are people turning up and taking other people's votes.
There's
not fraud, Eamonn. Forgive me, there's very little fraud at the ballot at the polling station. It's postal votes where the fraud takes place, and the government's doing nothing about postal votes, but it's stopping people. The most secure system for voting is the one we've got at the moment. You go along there, you want to vote, you get a pencil and you put a cross in the ballot.
Look, Norman, I hate to disillusion you, mate, but in Northern Ireland we have a saying, vote early and vote often.
Yes.
Right? So it's not secure. People turn up in different areas and the local boys organised. They hand out, right, you go and vote, you're Mrs Smith, you're Mrs Jones, you're Mr Jones, whatever. And that voter fraud was pretty rife.
Well, I mean, I'm not talking about Northern Ireland. I mean, you've got more expertise than I have on that, Eamonn. But what I can say is the number of prosecutions for people who are voting improperly in polling stations is virtually zero.
It's hard to prove, isn't it?
Well, it may be hard to prove, but there's plenty of prosecutions, people voting or collecting votes by post, whole families collecting votes, and one person voting for them all. That happens quite a lot.
I don't think it's that big an imposition because voter ID is quite normal in other countries. I do understand your point, though, that, you know, it's yet another obstacle to voting, but is it that hard to have some kind of identification? I mean, people aren't absolutely useless.
I would be happier if we had students able to vote with student ID. It's outrageous they have to bring something else along when you can bring a bus pass along if you're 65. That's quite wrong.
OK. Norman, did Russia nearly shoot down an RAF spy jet?
Yes, it did. On September the 29th last year, it came within 15 feet, which is no space at all in the air, of hitting an RAF jet. And who knows what would have happened between Britain and Russia if that had actually hit that RAF plane, which was an international airspace, by the way, near occupied Crimea. And this is one of the stories that's come out from the leak of American intelligence information, which is all over the internet now, which is really quite frightening because you're given details of Ukraine's capability, where they're short of ammunition and so on, which has been really helpful to the Russians. It's also been very damaging for the US because they've been apparently spying on their friendly countries. Well, they always have done, I think, but we now know about it. They've been spying on South Korea, for example. So this is a very damaging release of information. So I think the US want to get to the bottom of this, but in the meantime, it's done a lot of damage to Ukraine.
Emily, what...
Oh, go on.
Sorry?
I was just going to say, did anybody see the coverage of these children being reunited over the weekend? You know, thousands and thousands of Ukrainian children were abducted by the Russians during the whole conflict, and it's been painstaking, but they've managed to... I think they got 31 back over the weekend. I mean, out of 30,000 or something like that. But and the pictures of these children that were left behind because they were in these summer camps, and only 31 of them were... Anyway, it was very, very emotional reading. Only 31.
Emily, what is water inequality? This is on page 6 of The Guardian.
Yeah, so as there's been a study that's looking at water shortages around the world, and they're looking at South Africa in particular, but they say that their findings carry across the world, that shortages are down to the unequal use of water. Essentially, rich people use huge amounts more water than the average person or someone living in poverty, which makes sense. Swimming pools, cleaning your cars, having long showers, etc., etc. So they're saying they don't really come up with any solutions to this. They haven't said, oh, we need to ban swimming pools in South Africa, but they're drawing attention to the fact that people use water in very different ways and that that's more important than even climate change in water shortages. What's quite interesting is that the UK government is telling us to cut down our water use by 20% by 2028 or 2038. But, of course, there was a lot about Rishi Sunak and his swimming pool, and someone's done the maths, and it would take 3 years of daily power showers, 5 minutes each, to fill his swimming pool. So that's the equivalent. But I'm not sure what we do about this. I think in this country what we need is more reservoirs.
We haven't built any reservoirs. Yeah. We had this huge announcement a couple of weeks ago, the energy plans for the country. No mention of new reservoirs or anything.
Last one was dug 42 years ago or something.
42 years ago.
Yeah,
and the population's risen by 10 million. Where's the water coming from?
Yeah,
it's all leaking out, as a matter of fact. That's another thing that's wrong with it.
It's not, Norm. I mean, it is and it isn't, but it's also there are more factories, there's more manufacturing, there's more housing developments, which are just sort of being ignored all the time, that comes from the same reservoir pool. That's part of the problem as well. Let's talk about pubs. No, I'll talk to you, Norman.
Let's do some Labour. We've got Labour coming on in a second. And Starmer's going to introduce bills in his first 100 days to undo what they call Tory mistakes.
Yes, this is in the eye. And, I mean, whatever you think about his plans, thank goodness he's got some plans, because what we've had so far is a whole lot of attacks on the government and no indication to what Labour would actually do. And there's some suggestion here about 1 or 2 things you would do. For example, having an independent process for appointing the BBC chairman, which is something I very much agree with. There's also suggestions that it would clamp down on the water companies for their sewage.
Well, they've talked a lot about non-dom as well, haven't they?
They have. So they've actually come up with some ideas. And I think what people want, rather than stupid adverts about Rishi Sunak, they actually want some policy proposals they can discuss. And according to the Eye, we're going to see some of those. And I've hit the ground running. First 100 days, lots of bills, apparently.
Private schools probably be
more
They might be.
legislation, just what we need.
Well,
we need more.
There's a serious point there, which is you don't always have to have legislation. And in fact, all the things I did in government, I don't think I required legislation for any of them. So there's this kind of addiction to legislation, which is quite wrong in this country. We can do things without legislation.
OK.
Quick one on pubs. Do we need more pubs?
Pubs in crisis. Well, they're closing at record rates again. We see this all the time. But Katie Nichols, the UK Hospitality Chief Executive, who's a very good advocate, spokesperson for the representative for the pub industry and the rest of hospitality, she's saying it's business rates, obviously the lockdowns, just the squeeze in terms of the energy prices, and of course with the energy cap rising, that will cost huge amounts for pubs. People aren't going to pubs as much as well, drinking at home, too expensive. The price of a pint is always going up, and it's unsurprising considering how many costs these pubs have. But it's quite sad because pubs are nice, they're nice to have. It would be sad to see them all bulldozed or turned into...
I like the smell of a pub.
Oh, that's the bit I don't like.
That's
said by a true non-drinker. The thing I like the most about the pub is the smell of sticky carpets and ancient tobacco on the walls.
Because I used to work...
Damp.
I used to work in
damp. Lovely.
Well, that just makes me nostalgic.
Yeah.
Norman?
What's your favourite thing about pub?
The favourite thing is to drink the
same.
alcohol, actually. Pint of Guinness, if I can advertise Guinness.
OK. Guys, thank you very much indeed. Folks, please do stay with us. We'll be talking to the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Pat McFadden from Labour, right after this.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today. Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're still going through the newspapers this morning with Norman Baker and Emily Carver. And Norman, I think we go to the Sun for a cricketer, no ordinary cricketer. Tell us more.
No, this is. I want to say well done to Ken Hainsworth, who is 86 and is probably the longest serving or longest playing cricketer in the country. He started playing in 1958, when I was just 1 year old, and he's still going strong now. He's 86, not out, you might say.
Very good. Like it. Right,
That's
we've
brilliant.
got to leave it there, Norman. Norman Baker, Emily Carver, we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks for doing the papers with us.
So here we are on the day where junior doctors begin a 4-day strike, and the British Medical Association is demanding 35% pay rise. But what does Labour make of all of this?
Let's speak now to the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Pat McFadden. Good morning to you, Mr McFadden. Your thoughts about these strikes?
Good morning. Well, it's very damaging for the NHS when you see this happening. I mean, even when we don't have a strike on, we have 7 million people waiting for treatment, and the strikes themselves are estimated to result in postponement or cancellation, temporarily, hopefully, of a couple of 100,000 procedures and appointments for different things. So I think we have to make sure that both the government and the doctors' union leaders get around the table and resolve this as quickly as possible. But I don't think that should be the limit of our ambition, because, as I said at the beginning there, even when there isn't a strike on, the NHS is under enormous pressure and it's not working as people would want it to be. So I think we need a longer term plan as well to reduce the waiting lists, to recruit more staff, and to get the service back to the kind of operating level that we all hope to see.
Yes, but on the immediate crisis, the BMA is calling for 35%. The government says that's unreasonable and unaffordable. Do you agree with the government?
I don't think the doctors are going to get a 35% pay increase.
So you agree?
And you might remember when the nurses were on strike a month or two ago. I think their union leaders started off by asking for a 19% pay increase. I don't think we should be too distracted at the moment by the headline demand or request at the beginning of the strike. The important thing is to get round the table and try to negotiate a pay deal that's fair to doctors and also fair to the general taxpayer, who in the end of the day pays all the bills in the NHS. That's what needs to happen, with neither side putting up preconditions or saying we won't talk to you until this happens or that happens, because at the moment there's a standoff, and because of the standoff the patients are suffering.
But a great opportunity for you guys, Pat. It's an open goal. Another attack ad on Rishi Sunak then.
Well, I would point you to the record we had when we were in government on the NHS. We left office in 2010 with the highest levels of satisfaction in the service's history. At that time, you could get a GP appointment in 48 hours was the target. You'd be lucky if you get one within 2 weeks at the moment. We had far shorter waiting lists and waiting times, and we didn't have all these strikes. Now, I'm not saying we could get back to that situation overnight, because it took time, but we had to fix the NHS before, and if we're lucky enough to be elected to office, we'll fix it again.
Disagreeing with you, Pat, but I mean, are you in favour then of these direct ads, you know, these sock it to them ads that you're putting out at the moment?
Look, the ads punch quite hard, as you implied there, but they do so for a reason. We've had a government that's been in office for 13 years now. Last week we highlighted the record on crime and criminal prosecution, where we're charging at only a quarter of the rate that we were 7 or 8 years ago, and that's causing a real loss of confidence in the criminal justice system. This week we're talking about the rise in mortgage rates, which is hurting a first-time buyer to the tune of about £500 a month compared to a year ago, and part of the cause of that was the enormously irresponsible mini-budget from the Tory party last year. And so we're making a bigger point here, and we're not going to accept a situation where British politics is a change of Conservative Prime Minister every year or two, then everybody pretends it's year zero and the record of what went before doesn't count. That's not something we're going to accept. And if we have to put out some quite punchy ads to do that, then that's what we'll do.
Well, except it's not Liz Truss's face you're putting on that mini-budget, is it? It's Rishi Sunak, and he was not responsible for that. And it's the fact that you've gone for him in this kind of... If I may finish my point, because, you know, there are members of your own party who strongly disagree with the tactics, including, I believe, shadow cabinet members, Yvette Cooper among them. And even in The Guardian yesterday, I was reading the Guardian letters section, which you'd think would be your supporters, saying that these attacks on Rishi Sunak were a new low for the Labour Party and that this was gutter politics.
I'm having an earpiece problem here, but I'll keep going. But this is the point. We can't accept the situation that just because the Conservatives have a new leader, they have no responsibility for the record. That's not a point that we accept. And that's the underlying bigger message here. We've had 4 or 5 Conservative leaders, and I think British politics should have more to offer than simply pretending that we have a new Conservative leader every year or two, and then it's year zero, and nothing that went before counted.
To be fair, you made that point. I just want to understand why...
It's the same party in power for 13 years.
Yeah, but you did make that point with respect, and I just want to ask why your own colleagues object to these adverts.
Well, you have to ask them. My point is the Conservatives have got a 13-year record. We are going to point out that record, and we're not going to allow them to declare year zero every time they change leader. And it really matters to people because the record has resulted in a poor performance in the criminal justice system where the victims of crime simply don't trust the system to bring the perpetrators of those crimes to justice, and the charge rates reflect that. The charge rates are now a quarter of what they were 7 or 8 years ago. And when it comes to the economy, we've got the biggest fall of living standards in living memory this year and last year. That's what the government's own Office for Budget Responsibility has pointed out.
Well, Pat,
and people who are working hard in this country are falling behind their counterparts in other countries. These are legitimate issues for us to point out. I think the country can do better than this. And if we're lucky enough to be elected, I believe
Thanks, Pat. Pat, we've so much to talk about, no time to do it. A few political storms there. We've got to break off to bring people the detail of the other storm that's heading our way weather-wise. Pat McFadden, thank you very much indeed. Here's the weather with Greg Dewhurst.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Turning wet and windy over the next 24 hours or so. Met Office wind warnings already in force for today and through into Wednesday. This area of low pressure is going to bring that heavy rain, strong winds. We could see gusts of 50, 60 miles an hour possible in places, leading to some disruption, and then it slowly only eases out of the way into Thursday. But it's a cold but bright start this morning, plenty of sunny spells. We do have some showers across parts of Scotland in particular, but as we move through the day, we'll see the stick of cloud and rain moving in from the southwest in association with that area of low pressure, and the winds picking up too, particularly as we move into the afternoon. We'll see gusts of 50, 60 miles an hour, and this combined with some heavy rain will lead to some tricky driving conditions. Best of the sunshine holding on further north and east, but temperatures a little disappointing. Into the evening time, this band of rain pushes northeastwards quite quickly, heavy at times, leading some Difficult travelling conditions during the rush hour. Bumping up against colder air across Scotland, we could see some snow over the mountains. And then overnight we'll see the winds ease for a time, but still some showers moving in between clear spells. And this will allow temperatures to dip away 3 or 4 Celsius in the towns and cities. So a chilly start to Wednesday, but it won't be long before the winds start picking up again from the southwest, parts of Wales, southwest England, along some English Channel coast. 50, 60 miles an hour plus as possible, combined with some heavy rain, which also may fall as snow over the Welsh mountains. Elsewhere, we will see sunny spells, scattered showers, the winds a little lighter further north, and temperatures really struggling below average for the time of year, 11 or 12 at the very best. They're feeling quite cool into the afternoon. Further showers on Thursday and Friday, some of these heavy and thundery at times, but hopefully something a little drier as we head into the weekend, and temperatures just starting to rise a little bit as well.
Hundreds of thousands of operations will be cancelled as the most disruptive strike in the NHS's history has kicked off.
Hello there, very good morning to you. The time is just after 9 o'clock, Tuesday, the 11th of April. You're tuned into Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Health leaders have urged the public to avoid risky behaviour from today. As junior doctors begin walkouts, patients could face a full month of disruption as the NHS struggles to cope with one of the worst strikes in its history.
The American president will meet with leaders from all 5 of Northern Ireland's political parties on a visit to the UK that begins this evening. It's part of a push to restore power sharing in Stormont.
Well, the trip follows violence in Derry, Londonderry yesterday, with petrol bombs hurled at police during a Republican parade.
The former head of the British Army has claimed that the Queen wanted both William and Harry to fight the Taliban in Afghanistan, but decided it was too risky to send the future heir to the throne.
And we love to hear from you throughout the course of the programme. Keep sending in your thoughts on Twitter or via email gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Well, our top story this hour is that hundreds of thousands of operations are going to be cancelled as junior doctors across England and Wales begin a 4-day strike.
NHS leaders are warning it could be the most disruptive industrial action in the health services history, with services affected well into May.
Well, the Health Secretary says the strike risks patient safety and that the demand for a 35% pay rise is unaffordable.
Earlier, we spoke to junior doctor Frankie Jackson Spence, who told us the strikes are necessary in order for change to happen.
I think it's a real shame that we've got to this point where junior doctors are striking for the second time, but it's honestly needs to be a wake-up call for everyone. The strikes are necessary to restore a proper functioning NHS. The junior doctors make up half of the NHS workforce, and they've seen a 26.2% pay cut in the last 15 years. And so they want to be paid appropriately for their service, for such a long period of training and so much student debt. And I worry that without action like this, the government aren't taking the workforce seriously, and that's also doom and gloom for the NHS. So it's a real shame we've got to this point, but I do think it's very necessary to get them to listen.
Well, with junior doctors making up 40% of the medical workforce, millions of patients will inevitably be feeling the effects. Our South East reporter, Ray Addison, joins us from Eastbourne General Hospital this morning. Good to see you, Ray, and we're really hoping to hear from people who are on the picket line, not on the wards today, and hearing exactly what they have to say.
Absolutely. We have something of a stalemate as we stand here today, the beginning of 4 days of industrial action. The Department for Health and Social Care, of course, saying that no negotiations can take place until the strikes are called off. The BMA saying that they can't take part in talks until there's at least a reasonable starting offer on the table. Dr. James Collins is a 7th-year junior doctor, and he joins me now. Doctor, we last spoke a month ago on this exact same spot. The strike, the picket line was much better attended then. What's changed in the last month?
So
in terms of the negotiations, frustratingly little, if I'm honest. Our chairs have had numerous, they've given numerous opportunities to Mr. Steve Barclay to come to the table and come to the negotiating table, and they've been widely publicised. And he's only turned up to a single one, which he rescheduled and scheduled for only half an hour long. In terms of the picket line turnout at the moment, I mean, one of the things to bear in mind is that there is a demonstration up in London later on this afternoon, which is expected to have over 10 to 15,000 doctors attending, and we believe that quite a lot of them have gone up to that to help support.
Now, NHS is warning that something like 250,000 appointments and operations are having to be cancelled as a result of this industrial action. Some people saying that junior doctors are betraying their Hippocratic oath. How do you respond to that?
All I can do is apologise to anyone who's had their appointments cancelled. None of us want to do this. What I will say is that I've had numerous meetings with management, and particularly at my trust, they are happy that there is safe staffing from the perspective of the consultants and our specialist colleagues. The hospital is safe. Patients won't come to harm from their acute and emergency care perspective. And again, I say to people that if they do have an emergency, that they should still come to hospital. But in terms of the long-term wait, at the moment there's over 7 million people on a waiting list, and this is us saying enough is enough, and this is us trying to address that. You can't pull down that waiting list without addressing the recruitment and retention crisis that's within the NHS. And the only way that we're going to be able to solve this in the medium to long term is by having full pay restoration.
Dr. Collins, thank you very much for joining us. Well, Health Secretary Steve Barclay is saying that people should attend appointments unless they've been told otherwise by the NHS, and to continue to call 999 in a life-threatening emergency.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you. In the studio, we've got Eve Pollard for her take on things. I remember going to the island of Kos, Greek island, and that's where Hippocrates was born, as in the Hippocratic Oath. And I think memory may delude me on this, but I think there was a tree that you sat under. He sat under a tree and made his Hippocratic Oath.
Oh, really?
But there was a mark, there was a spot anyway. The point of which I'm getting to, all of this is very noble and fantastic, and that these doctors take a Hippocratic Oath. However, I think they've been betrayed by successive governments who just don't pay them enough. I mean, you and I, neither of us are smart enough to be doctors.
No.
We're not, right? If I could have been a doctor,
we'd leave things inside.
We would.
Oh, where's
stitch
that
people
gone?
up. And then the thing is, these people have to spend years training, being called junior, and their pay is not up to scratch. And the government can make this argument: 35% is unattainable. They're wrong to state the percentage, because the percentage is unattainable. But why was the percentage allowed to drift so much?
That's absolutely true. Well, it's interesting. This new young BMA, sort of, as it were, they're activists. They're quite right to be activists. They're looking after that. They were voted in 2 years ago, 2021. Harry de Quetteville in the Telegraph did a big story about them, and they called them the medical momentum, I think, at the time. But as we all saw in that fantastic series, This is Going to Hurt. Do you remember Adam Kay about the life of a junior doctor? Life of a junior doctor is very, very difficult. Now, I suspect, and from what I know, talking to doctors, things will be covered in the next 4 weeks. But, of course, that doesn't mean that your operation will take place, or all the treatment you're expecting to do will take place. The NHS is a total disaster at the moment. They need a royal commission. They need everybody in there, doctors, patients, everybody, to discuss how we go forward. The trouble is, medicine's improved fantastically. We've no idea how many people are in this country getting free medical attention. We need to build more hospitals. I know that apparently the Tories have started that. I don't know where it is now. And also, if Matthew Taylor, who's the head of the NHS Trust, is saying we need ACAS, we need ACAS.
Right, so this is the conciliation service.
Correct.
Because the feeling is the two sides have just become so entrenched, there's actually hardening of
Did he turn up for
Yeah.
meetings? Did they not turn up for meetings? Would they understand if it couldn't be 35% now? It might rise to that over the next few years. And you've got a National Health Service where things are still not digitalised. If you want to move somebody, a friend of mine's husband sadly died, But if they wanted to move him from one ward to another in the same hospital, 10 pieces of paper. And by the way, most of it is paper. It's not even on computer. It needs a lot of money. It needs galvanising. And perhaps, tragically, for those of us who can afford it, we need to pay every time. If you go in France, you pay 35 euros.
To see a GP.
Absolutely. And the system works brilliantly.
Same in Southern Ireland.
Correct. They also have identity cards. We all walk around with an identity card. It's called a mobile phone. It's called a credit card. Why don't we just put those in so that people can't get on a plane?
Well, we're very wedded,
here,
aren't we, to the idea of free at the point of
and I think that's absolutely right. But some of us, and a lot of us, I mean, in France, if you're a child, you don't pay.
How do you... Is that just opt out if you feel you're wealthy? I mean, a lot of people do. They just go private.
Of course they do.
Well, I'll tell you something. You should be breathalyzed when you come into casualty. And if you're drunk on a Friday or Saturday
then
night,
you should pay.
You should leave your credit card.
If you're overweight and you get a heart attack, or what if you're playing rugby and you break... The argument has always been
you
that you
need
do actions
attention
yourself that have implications on your health.
There are certain cases, and you can make it very clear who should get free treatment and who should pay something that is reasonable. I had both my children on the National Health. If somebody had asked me for £100 for going home with a healthy baby, I'd have given it to them in an instant.
OK. What would you give? What would you give to the NHS? Let us know this morning. Get in touch. More from Eve shortly after we bring you up to date with what else is happening news-wise.
Keir Starmer is planning to launch more ads attacking the Prime Minister, with the next one blaming him for crashing the economy. The Labour leader says Rishi Sunak's fingerprints are all over struggling household budgets. It follows the party's original ad, which accused the Prime Minister of not wanting child sex abusers to go to prison.
In America, a man who shot 5 colleagues dead has been identified as 23-year-old Connor Sturgeon. 9 other people, including a police officer, were wounded in the attack, which took place at a bank in Louisville, Kentucky. The man was shot dead at the scene.
1 million smokers will be encouraged to swap cigarettes for vapes in a new government scheme. Under Swap to Stop, set to be announced today, vape starter kits will be offered to almost 1 in 5 smokers in England to push for a smoke-free nation.
Well, this is what I'm totally confused about. Is vaping good for you or not bad for you, or just not as bad as smoking is? And why should people be getting that free? We were talking about what you pay in NHS. So if you want a fag, should you get a vape? But is a vape going to kill you but just takes longer to kill you? What the heck is going on there? Let us know your view on that. As a matter of fact, I would go straight to the point on that at 9:30.
We will.
Andrew and Dawn this morning.
You know,
Good
funny you should
morning.
mention, we are having that very debate.
Yeah.
Should we be giving free vape kits to encourage people off cigarettes? Now, there are harms with vaping, but it's not as harmful as smoking.
No, exactly. And good luck getting treatment on the NHS, as we know.
Yes.
4-day strike straight after a bank holiday.
Terrible.
350,000 appointments and people are affected by this. That's a lot of people
But who's
with
gonna
waiting
take,
lists
but
already.
Dawn, who's going to take these doctors seriously? Who's going to take their claims seriously? Who's going to take the fact that they're educated to very high standard seriously? And who's going to stop them going to South Africa, Australia, Canada, and this brain drain that we have from the country if they don't do this?
Look, I think most people watching and listening this morning can see both sides to this. I think the fact that it is 4 days after a bank holiday, there's a political thing going on here, and I would like some of the doctors that you've been talking to this morning to go and explain to someone who's had their cancer appointment cancelled today why they're doing it.
Eve was talking earlier about the BMA. I did a big number on the BMA about a week or so ago. A lot of the people who have got into positions of power in the BMA are political activists who are determined to use this dispute to damage the Tory government. That's not good, because that's patients being exposed on a political altar. Very bad.
We're also going to the races, or are we? Grand National at risk this weekend.
Because of?
Eco-animal
Of course.
activists.
Who else? Who else?
What do you think of the Grand National? I mean, I do think it is the single biggest spectacle of a sporting occasion that the world has.
Oof, that's a big claim.
It's a big play, and I've been there, I've covered it as a reporter, I've stood at Beecher's Brook. There is nothing, except if you were in war at Waterloo or something, that to hear horses charge like that.
And Beecher's Brook is daunting. How tall is it? And they managed to get over it. It is dangerous for the horses, but I always have me flutter.
I just wouldn't want to be someone trying to glue myself to one of those fences in front of, 50,000 people there who are very, very into their racing and maybe very relaxed on that particular day.
Yeah, it's a great event, and I always watch it.
Well, what else is going to be great is your programme, 9:30.
Thank you.
Look forward to it.
Thank you. And we're going to be asking Eve Pollard what she makes of a lot of the big issues of the day and the Queen's military wish for William and Harry to fight the Taliban in Afghanistan after this.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end.
I can't
Britain's
wink,
listening.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back. Some breaking news to bring you. In the last few moments, it has been confirmed by the CBI that their boss, the Director General, Tony Danker, there, has been dismissed with immediate effect. Now, this is following the independent investigation into specific complaints of workplace misconduct against him. But the board has asked us to make it clear that this is not the subject of any of the more recent allegations that were made in the Guardian newspaper, but that actually Tony Danker himself has determined that his own conduct fell short of that expected of the Director General. So that's the breaking news. Tony Danker, the boss at the CBI, has stood down with immediate effect.
So, Eve Pollard, what is the Confederation of British Industry? What do they do?
It varies. Recently, I don't think they do that much, but they started off by being a way of the government and other people, newspapers, getting access to big business and finding out what they were doing. I think, agreed, I've not been involved lately, but I think it's become just a sort of good old chaps, and some women, but not that many women, having a good time. It was necessary probably when, you know, businesses felt they weren't getting the right coverage in the press, right coverage on TV. 30 years ago was big stuff. I think it's time to be wound up.
OK, well, the boss man's been wound up, that's for sure. Right, now we're going to talk about the Joe Biden in Northern Ireland. Biden loves his Irish roots. It's taken him long enough to confirm he's going to come. It's a flying visit into Belfast tonight and out again tomorrow.
Yes, he's going to. He's doing this for himself because he obviously loves the whole Irish thing. But he's doing it back home. Remember, there are many, many people in America who have Irish backgrounds.
No, and he hasn't ruled out. As a matter of fact, he's more than hinted that he will run again.
Yes.
Now, you know, whatever is right or wrong with the man, he will be in his mid-80s when he takes office next time round if he was to win. Is there nobody whispering in his ear and saying, Joe, you've had a good run, that's enough?
I thought Dr. Jill would whisper in his ear.
She is a doctor, isn't she?
She is a doctor.
Yeah, she's a medical doctor.
Yes, I would have thought that she would be saying, OK, Joe, we've had a great 4 years. Let's go out on a high. I think it depends who he's going to run against. I think if Trump tries to win, I think Biden will have a go and probably Biden will win. I think if it's DeSantis or someone newer, someone younger, that might change things.
Speaking of Dr. Jill and President Biden finally confirming that he's coming to Northern Ireland, he's not going to be at the coronation.
Yeah, but I gather he feels...
Not the only one.
Not to you, not you.
To be confirmed. Anyway.
I think the feeling was it was too much because, of course, the coronation is pretty soon, May the 6th. And I think that he's coming for a royal visit. And let's be very honest, if you come to the coronation, you might be stuck at the back because a lot of royals...
16th row, wasn't he?
Exactly. And whereas if you come and you get the full carriage from the station and, you know, marching up and down in front of our amazing soldiers, I think it's a special thing. And I think he'd rather wait for that and probably have it in an election year.
Now, the Queen and her grandsons. Tell us.
Yes. So she believed that if they were taking a shilling, that they ought to perform their duty and go to theatres of war.
It's a fascinating phrase. They've taken my shilling. I presume a lot more than a shilling, and they should go. Well, this is what kings and their descendants have done forever. Every king sent their son into battle, lead from the front. It was obviously decided later by other people. Only one should go. I think it was right that Harry should go. I think it was wrong that he should talk about killing 25 Taliban.
Of course.
I mean, but if you don't lead from the top in those sort of wars, I think that's a very important thing. As there were two boys, one could go.
But you're thinking this sort of senses or smells of favouritism, are you?
No, it actually doesn't surprise me that much. I think we all know Harry's the spare, and you know.
Well, I'm afraid that's the job.
More shocking about this story to me is the breach of protocol by Sir Mike Jackson and why he's suddenly blabbing to ITV about a private conversation with the monarch.
Because she's dead.
Well, I know, but
she's dead. But
gentlemanly.
But I mean, to be fair, people have known stories about. There are many people going around who have wonderful stories about the Queen. I don't see them revealing it. Very, very not done to do this.
Did I tell you my story about the Queen?
Go on.
Right, so
he has no problem.
I've got no problem blabbing it. So I was being awarded the OBE by the Queen, and you said you get about a minute and a half with it. And when she's finished with you, give me your hand. When she's finished with you,
she does the push.
She pushes that. Have you got an honour?
Of course.
What have you got?
I've got an OBE.
Did you get the push?
Look, it's amazing. So, what do you have, Isabel?
I've got nothing.
Oh, sorry, nothing, right. So anyway, she goes, so she says, you must have interviewed an awful lot of people in your time. And I said, I have, Mom. I said, in fact, I've interviewed everybody in your family. So about 15 seconds gone now.
Yes.
And she said, oh, really? I said, with the exception of one. She said, who? I said, you, Mum, you. But we could sort that out today. I said, because we're near the end of the queue, and if you just walk down the end, I'll record you on my phone, and we'll complete the whole set. And she went,
And the push,
came after 20 seconds.
She was smart, wasn't she?
That was the end of that.
She knew it would be devilishly difficult to deal with you.
Yeah, exactly. Very clever woman.
That's great. You're honoured like me. That's fantastic.
It was a lovely day.
It was a very lovely day.
Yes.
Isabel's lovely. Next time we're
I came to your party. You might have forgotten. I was part of the day.
Yeah, but you weren't at the palace.
No, I wasn't at the palace.
Were you there that day?
I came to your party, yeah.
Did you, right?
Unbelievable.
You float off in a haze.
I sat next to you for most of the afternoon.
Did you have a party that day?
Of course.
Party, yeah.
Yeah.
It's very, very nice, lovely. Eve Pollard, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much indeed. We will say goodbye to you. Thank you for joining us this morning. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It has.
And we do intend, all things being equal, to be back from tomorrow at 6 a.m.
We do, but up next it's Dawn and Andrew with To The Point.
Good morning, and indeed it is Andrew Pearce, Dawn Neeson
And
here.
Dawn Neeson, exactly. And we are feeling frisky, not risky. We didn't say risky because risky is dangerous today, people.
It is, because of the junior doctor strike, the biggest strike in the NHS history. 4 days, we're going to be talking about that. Also, on the same subject,
yes,
your health.
Vaping, right, OK. Are you happy that your taxpayers' money is paying people to vape?
Which we know vaping isn't good for you, but better than smoking. So that's one of the many debates we're having.
Yeah, and we're possibly going to the races.
We are.
Or are we?
Grand National.
But all of this coming after this very short break. Don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage.